Hi everyone, and a very warm welcome to DevMarcon, the first developer marketing summit from the PMA. Thank you so much for tuning in today. We hope you enjoy the sessions that we have lined up for you. With expert presentations, specialist fireside chats, and deep dive panel discussions on the agenda, suffice to say, you're in for a treat. Just before we jump in, I want to take a moment to thank everyone who's played a part in making this event possible. Our sponsors, partners, speakers, and of course you, the Product Marketing Alliance community. You can engage with all our speakers and their sessions today by posting your questions in the comments section of the broadcast, or you can reach out to them in the Developer Marketing channel in our Slack community. Remember, you can also catch up with all the day's content on demand, plus a whole host of other amazing benefits by becoming a PMA member. But for now, it gives me great pleasure to introduce our next session.
Thanks for having me today at the Developer Marketing Summit organized by our beloved PMA. In today's talk, I will be speaking about Mission Possible, and that's the science behind feedback gathering from developers, and specifically on such products as APIs and SDKs. But before we start, I would like to ask you, what do you think developers have in common with Japanese people? I personally love Japan. I've been there 2 years ago, and it was my first time there, and I really loved it. This was for me a magical place and an eye-opening trip, and I pretty much have the same feeling towards developers, because I simply cannot code, and I'm always fascinated by these people who actually are able to create amazing stuff. So here's the 3 similarities that I found. Apart from the language that they speak and I don't understand, both developers and Japanese are extraordinarily creative and intelligent. The Japanese cartoons and technology are always fascinating and very different from European or American culture. And same with developers. Sometimes they come up with incredible solutions that allows us to enjoy the world we live in today. Every person knows that hardworking is definitely a common word that classifies a Japanese mindset. And I find developers in the same category. And although the word is not on this slide, but I would also call Japanese and developers as perfectionists. I'm sure that there are many more similarities, but the last one that I would like to highlight is that developers and Japanese people are both community-driven. Unlike America or Europe, where group work is often disliked because sharing the workload with other students inevitably means that it gets divided unequally. Japanese students thrive over it. They prefer not to have to voice their opinions alone, but would rather share ideas with their peers and make a group decision. And a lot of times it feels the same among developers. They take a lot from the communities and they also feel the need to give back. In fact, Scrum and Agile principles are also based on collective decision-making. To cut story short, everybody loves them, but truly understanding these 2 audiences is for some reason always been a challenge, especially for those who come from business practice. And if you ever read the book of The Shoe Dog from founders of Nike or Steve Jobs' biography, where both these entrepreneurs described their trip to Japan and how they had to make the deal, it was definitely a challenge and a lot of miscommunications. And I sometimes feel the same when I'm trying to market products to developers. In any case, today we're not going to solve the mystery of Japanese people, but as for developers, at least we can try. How is a developer different from an average human being? First, developers love simplicity. They deal enough with complex algorithms in daily jobs, and they love solving problems. But in normal life, they want everything to be as easy as possible. Now, if you look at average human, our brains are also wired for simplicity, thanks to research done by Daniel Kahneman, author of Thinking Fast, Thinking Slow. The second characteristic of developers is having a sense of purpose, or knowing that whatever they do has an impact. I remember when I was working for a startup, we were building software in edtech industry, and we wanted to help overcome the shortage of teachers with technology. And during lunchtime, my developers would share how recruiters from really big companies, for example, banks, would approach them and try to offer them triple salaries. But nothing would buy them to switch because they didn't see for what purpose. And the topic of purpose living really picked up already 7 years ago, and still quite hot topic for many of us, not just developers. The next on my list is that developers really don't like spamming. I don't need to tell you that most of the developers have ad blockers. I think you know it pretty well by yourself. But they also ignore cold marketing and cold sales emails and ignore almost everything that's not relevant to them. And if you look at us people, we also get pretty annoyed. So that's definitely not something that we're different from them. And last one is that developers like to test things before they buy. And the same happens to us. If we buy shoes, we first try them or return them if they were shipped to our house and they didn't meet our expectations. So the question to you, are developers that different from us? My answer is no. We are all human after all. So how can we use that information in feedback gathering from developers? My name is Borbotko, and I'm a product marketing expert at TomTom, the location technology provider. With a background in marketing and business, I have several years of experience developing go-to-market strategies for international high-tech companies and local startups. When it comes to product marketing, I'm very passionate about positioning and messaging. I'm a great believer that communicating about your products and services is best when your grandma understands it. And the latest project that I'm working on right now at TomTom is feedback gathering in B2D and B2B environment, making it scalable and accessible to all relevant stakeholders. So today I will be telling you a story of Mission Possible, and we will cover the situation I acquired at TomTom, the challenge that I faced, and the solution with some practical tips. But first thing first, I want to give you some context. TomTom has changed over the last years. It transformed from being a personal navigation device company into this giant that now competes with companies like Google and also other tech providers. TomTom has a diverse product portfolio, and you can compare those products. They have different jobs to be done, different use cases, and they fit differently in different markets. So here we talk about APIs, SDKs, and even metadata. What also happens is that we have really slow sales cycle because we now mostly operate in B2B and B2D environment. At the same time, we as PMM team also work on our messaging and positioning and go-to-market strategies, and we really need that input from customers. And we also have on the other side of the table product managers who are constantly asking for feedback and using information to improve the product or even get inspired to build new ones. So both functions constantly require access to somewhat information flow from customers. But like everything in life, there is a challenge. So in many organizations, you have a dedicated customer success team that's constantly working on feedback activities. And if you don't have that, typically a PMM would take over that role. So that's the case at TomTom. We don't have a dedicated customer success team. What we also don't have is a user-facing application because we work in a B2D and B2B environment. So we can't really go behind the scenes, monitor the behavior of our users. All we have is our sales teams, customer support, and a developer portal. Lastly, feedback is just all over the place. You have internal teams constantly containing information. You have external sources like social media, different analytical tools, and I can just go on. And the deal is not that we as TomTom are disorganized and complete mess. No, but it's just so many channels, in fact, too many of them, of different nature. So it really becomes tricky to analyze that, especially when it comes in a text form. I wouldn't dare to say the concrete figure, but I would say if you work for a high-tech company, the majority of your employees are developers. So we decided to check with them what would they advise us to do if we wanted to collect feedback from developers. We also spoke to business teams and product managers to see what their requirements to feedback would be. So we found many insights in having those conversations. But one thing I really would like to highlight, and it's not rocket science, and it would probably fit very well on a home motivational poster, is that asking and searching for feedback is one thing. But if you do ask for it, it implies that you will have to act on it. And of course, it depends on the quality of the feedback and the quantity of it. But generally speaking, this is what happens. Feedback is responsibility. And if nothing happens for a while, people don't see the point of sharing it with you anymore. And this makes feedback gathering activity quite complicated. So we scratched our head and we decided to come up with a 3-step approach to feedback gathering activities at TomTom. First thing you need is a developer experience index, a set of metrics that measured and analyzed regularly. Secondly, you need to establish a conversation with developers through actions. And lastly, you need to build a learning community, and that can be both internal and external, or vice versa. Let's start with the step number 1, and that's Developer Experience Index, or DXI. This is something we didn't take from a big consulting report, or we didn't really read any smart books about it. This is purely our TomTom improvisation, and this is something we're still pioneering at the moment. So perhaps we don't have all the insights, whether it really works or not, but yeah, just bear with me. Maybe this is something that already other tech companies do, and it already exists, maybe in a different form, and maybe they even call it differently. But for now, I would just say that we didn't take it from anywhere. It's our own invention. So what you have is 5 stages of a developer journey. A discovery stage that is related to everything your marketing teams do hard work on. And that's the answer to the question, do I want to use this? Do I need this? Will it help me solve my problem? Next stage that a developer will probably go through is the onboarding. And that's, let's say, if he decided that, okay, this will probably work for me. So I want to get started. And I want to start trying it. So how do I do that? The third, and I find it quite crucial for developers, and sometimes I would even say it can come both in discovery and onboarding experience, but very crucial element is documentation. And that's the stage where it answers questions like, how do I use APIs? How do I ensure that what I will implement in my product is implemented well? If I struggle, how can I get help? And that's where the support stage plays a big role as well. And lastly, not to be forgotten, is that, that if the developer sticks with your company, you want to measure this loyalty to your brand and products. So just to recap, DXI is just a set of metrics measured regularly, and all the information that you gather in different developer stages are consolidated in one dashboard. The different stages of DXI are based on a set of quantitative metrics such as Net Promoter Score, customer satisfaction score, customer effort score, but all those metrics mean nothing unless they are supported by qualitative information, such as developer comments. And that's where sentiment analysis of those comments comes really handy. You might wonder why doing DXI in the first instance. First of all, it's just effortless for developers. It's just one click on a star rating or a number rating, thumb down or thumb up, plus the text field if they want to do so. It also happens in real time when developers are building their products, so they can react immediately and you can get more insights on your products. It's also consistent because you collect the same data input all the time, so you can easily compare or pile the data together. And lastly, it's just a pull versus a push approach, because users are not they're not feeling forced to give you feedback. In fact, they are given a channel to share it with us if they feel like it. So they're given a choice. So how do you collect the DXI? Well, you establish different metrics on different pages. For example, on each documentation page on our developer portal, we have a thumb up and thumb down button. So that's a CSAT metric. And we also allow to have a text field. So when people are doing onboarding and they go through documentation, they can immediately tell us if what they search for is there or not. And we have similar system in our emails, welcome emails that we send them out once they registered. So they can also give us a 5-star rating or one of those if their onboarding experience were at par with what they expected. And all this comes nicely in this dashboard that you see on the right. This dashboard has, like, everybody has access to the dashboard. So product managers, product marketing managers, anybody who needs to get access to it can, and they just monitor information that they need to get from there. Now, I know that market has a lot of sophisticated tools when it comes to feedback gathering. We at TomTom didn't really investigate those tools yet. We are planning to at some point, but for now we decided that we want to use the tools that we already have in house, and that's Power BI. That's where our dashboard lives. We use Opinion to collect the feedback, and we use Salesforce for additional input that we are unable to collect from Opinion. And another source that is not here is, of course, Google Analytics, that we also find handy. Question to you will be, what do you think we achieved so far in 6 months thanks to DXI? As I said, it's still a pilot project, so and still an MVP. So don't get too hyped up, but there's something definitely worth sharing. So first thing, we of course collected the data, we analyzed it, and we figured that some of our products are not positioned correctly. So that's what we are busy on doing right now. We are trying to fix those positioning issues that we encountered. We also figured that our documentation needs to be simplified. Now, I also know from talking to other experts that documentation is like your website is just a constantly living thing that you will be updating all the time. But yeah, there's always, of course, room for perfection. But we also realized that there are some product issues that we couldn't capture before. And finally, the last 2 years, we spent a lot of time working on onboarding experience for our developers. And we thought we did a pretty good job. But apparently, developers are still struggling. So we are fixing it right now, and hopefully it will be out of our roadmap. You would think that this is already an awesome source of information, but we humans always want more. And the step number 2 to gathering developer insights relies in building a conversation through actions. Well, we noticed that from time to time we have churned users and we have no idea why they leave. And that happened even before we placed the DXI. So we decided it would be good to figure out. And 2 years ago, we tried to have interviews with developers. We tried to issue surveys with free credits and Amazon gift cards, but nothing worked. And we would get very, very little result, if any. So we again approached our internal developers and asked them for help. And as you can guess, back to a drawing board. And we found out that all our previous attempts were lacking single-click answer email, because perception of developers about surveys is that it's something long, boring, and would require a lot of effort from their side. They also said that having mandatory fields in the survey are really demotivating. They also said that time is crucial when approaching developers. If developer joins, he would care much less investing his time in your company unless he knows that his feedback will change something. So they advise to approach developers when they're still building or testing APIs of your company. And finally, developers don't like marketing in general. So marketing generated emails is definitely no go. In fact, they want a developer to developer approach and in a more personalized email where you genuinely asking for help. And if we take email as a channel that you want to use to approach developers for feedback, we also said that writing it short way with a humble tone of voice is something that really helps the effort. Now, something that we currently at TomTom don't do, but I know that other companies do it quite well, for example, Microsoft, and I heard that a few times from developers as well, that they actually appreciate when you have your roadmap open to them so that they can see what features are coming and when, and it especially helps them with planning their own roadmap and feature releases. And it's also an opportunity for them to have feature requests and the developer community then can upvote. And you can also help your product managers with prioritization. Now we're at step 3, and I recently read a book written by Developer Media where they interview a few developers each time on their marketing preferences. And the conclusion was that developers can usually get hooked by ads if they're cool, event, or something related to education. And a lot of time that learning happens in the community. So if you're a company that offers APIs, you should start thinking of building your own developer community or using external sources. What I'm going to share now is not new. Stack Overflow, Reddit, GitHub are usual places where developers would go to ask for advice. But there are other communities. For example, TomTom has their own forum and community activities, which we heavily invest our time in. And there are other communities that are more dedicated to a specific coding language. And back to the interviews that we've done with our TomTom developers, most of them confirmed that if you want to engage into conversation with the developer and get their feedback, email is not the best channel. Forums are the best way to go. Now, another area of exploration, sometimes forgotten or underestimated, is students and universities. Although students don't have money, one day there will be ones founding those great startups or working for big corporations. So it's extremely important to think of that community and show them your brand already at that stage, or even earlier, like at the kindergarten. And perhaps students don't have resources, but they can be invaluable if you give them predefined tasks and let them build something with your APIs and ask them about their experience. Or what you can also do is make a deal with a professor and let them go wild with their ideas, which might uncover other markets or potential for your products. This method, of course, has its disadvantages, such as not being your target audience and definitely not going to flesh out all the problems that your target customer might face with the product. But it will definitely help with things like developer flow, making grammar-proof documentation, and smooth onboarding. Last poll of today, did you learn something you can use on your current project or future project? And just to recap, today I equipped you with tools on how to gather feedback from developers in an effortless way and in real time, how to establish continuous dialogue and via which channels, and hopefully this will all lead to delivering experiences from product and marketing perspective that developers love. And if you remember only one thing from today's talk, remember that developers are human and they like and dislike the same things as we all do. Thank you for being here. Enjoy the summit. They're really cool professionals on this event, and I'm looking forward to watching their presentations. And feel free to connect with me via either of these channels if you want to ask questions or just to connect. And as I said, I don't know everything. We're still pioneering this approach. So if you also have suggestions or some ideas, feel free to drop me a note. I will really value that. Always be learning. Thanks a lot. And we stay in touch.
Welcome back to DevMarkOn, the first developer marketing summit from the Product Marketing Alliance. I hope you're enjoying the content so far. I want to thank you all for joining us and send out an extra special thank you to all our sponsors, partners, and participants who together have made this event possible. Their sessions are bursting with insights to help you level up. But remember, the learning doesn't stop here. If you haven't already, you can become a PMA member and benefit from unlimited access to all today's content, along with a whole host of other exclusive content and tools. Or simply upgrade to an Access All Areas pass to catch up with all session recordings on demand. And remember, have your questions at the ready. Simply post them in the comments section and get awesome advice from our experts. We've got another awesome session lined up for you now, so sit back, relax, and enjoy the talk.
And thank you for joining this session today with us. And I would like to thank also the Product Marketing Alliance for having me here in this amazing festival. Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here again. So a little bit about me. My name is Asaf. I'm 34 years old. I'm based in Tel Aviv. I started my journey actually as a PR or a spokesperson. I decided to try then a little bit different angles until I came across an opportunity of being a project manager, which eventually I evolved into being a product manager. And then this is where I fell in love actually in the product and marketing realm. So after that, after a few years, I got an opportunity also to become a product marketing manager. And this is where I really feel like I belong, and this is combine all the skills and stuff that I like to do. Besides that, I like to do music a little bit in my home. I live with my fiance in Tel Aviv, and I love cooking also. So yeah, cool. So why are we here today? Eventually, I wanted to share with you our story as Wix and Velo, how it evolved, what were the challenges that we've encountered as Wix, and how we tried eventually to fulfill the intent of our users, our customers, and how we translated it into goals and KPIs eventually. So for people of you who are not familiar with Wix, Wix is a comprehensive website builder platform, online, of course. It allows people all around the world to create professional web apps and just by simply dragging and dropping elements and apps. So the way to customize this amazing website that they create and to make it even more custom and meet their business needs is by using Velo. And Velo is the development platform on top of Wix and Editor X editor, and it allows developers to use JavaScript and customize the behavior of the site, and it's pretty amazing product. And we will talk, and you will see it a little bit later on. The thing about Velo and Wix, we had some perception problems, and the thing is like this. We all deal with different types of products and audiences, obviously, and every audience has its own unique style, tone, way of consuming information or learn. It could be also like business owners, it could be designers, entrepreneurs, developers, but somehow it always feels to me that developers are a very specific type of audience. They are very sophisticated. You cannot just simply use obviously fluff on them, or you just it's not easy to market them just with real good taglines. They want to know how, they want to use the latest technologies that are now around the world. They always need to be up to date. They have their own tools that they're used to. It's very hard to move developers from one tool that they are already used to a different one and change their way of working. Another thing is that they don't click much on ads. From our experience, developers click-through rate is so low, it's 0 point something, really. And it's all around different platforms. Believe me, it could vary, obviously, some places more and some places less, but in general, they don't like to click ads. And they trust only fellow developers mostly. It's very, very important for them to learn about new stuff and use new stuff by recommendation. They follow recommendation of thought leaders, professionals around the world, all on different like websites and social platforms. But in Wix, we deal mostly with DIY audience. The thing about the DIY do-it-yourself audience, was used to be mostly like small to medium businesses and people who needed a website so they can do it pretty much quickly, and then even without knowing how to code, right? So as we grew in the product, the company, and amount of users, there was a real need from our users for a way to gain more control over the website. So the company worked really, really hard, days and nights, just in order to provide our users a way to enable them to customize their site. And Wix Code was the answer, actually. So on 2017, we released Wix Code. When Wix Code was open, we had already a lot of existing users. So we invested a lot of effort in our inbound, and still do. Our users were really happy about it, and and the exposure and adoption was growing, there was huge demand for it and for more capabilities. But it still was very challenging to attract the audience of developers, the top developers, to use it, because it was a little bit simple for them at the beginning, or didn't give them a much of control as they wanted to. But the thing is like this. At Wix, we are user obsessed. We are focused on our users' intent, what they are trying to achieve, what is their main intent. So we put a lot of effort into interviewing our users and potential ones, of course, to learn more about the missing gaps and what should we need to develop, which features. We extended and deepened so much our BI events to get even more data. It's really hard to get this data from developers because they code and use APIs, but we have deepened it much more so we can truly understand their behavior and what they like and what they use most. And also, we are putting a lot of effort in our forum. We are always looking at the forum discussions, what are questions, how often they pose this kind of questions and how many answers do they have. We really have also a lot of data regarding this. And obviously we have feature requests. We give a lot of effort to our feature request and a lot of focus. This is like really drive the product. And obviously we learn about our potential customers so much, but this is where we want to head. This is where we want to go eventually and be there. So in order to understand their needs and how to deliver them better, eventually, we had to learn few stuff. And this is like the lessons that we learned. We need more features that will support their dev cycle. developers need even more control over the website. They need, from their perspective, they need as much as control as they want. Um, and the third one is that they need a lot of education, whether they are developers or coders or non-coders. Education, education, education. This is the key, and obviously to make it in the most in the best way that fits their needs. But and obviously the fourth point is to grow the community. The community supports each other. When it comes to developers, it's so important. The community will be and still is a big engine to grow the product through the community, obviously. And the fifth point that is, unfortunately, still when developers hear Wix, they used to say, or like when they used to hear Wix, they used to say, so you don't need me for that, right? Like it's like DIY platform. So it's still quite challenging to bring traditional developers. Um, so then we understood that we have like a really perception problem. Like developers got intimidated by learning about Wix and hearing Wix. So, but we do feel we feel that we have like the best product, and for developers we have so much to offer. So we wanted to move from the DIY, the do-it-yourself users, to the developers essentially, and it was a big challenge. But what we understood that maybe we should change a little bit our approach and to offer them it in the product in a different way. So we renamed in 2019. We decided to rebrand from Wix Code that had Wix in it to Corvid. That was our best name at the time. It was really cool. It had like four and it was like kind of ringing good, and we create like amazing logo, and like and everybody used to be great Corvid developers. But as you may know, we we encountered some problem with this name, even though we had a great job like creating a unique brand, more sophisticated, more less talking about Wix, but rather about the development. Um, the name came into a problem, and even though we were growing, and for those of you who are not aware what Corvid is, Corvid is or Corvidae. It's from the crows family. It's super intelligent, really fast, high bird. So yeah, we did grow and use this, and that branding was great, but then pandemic came. So instead of being Corvid, it sounded like COVID, and nobody wants to be a COVID developer, right? So we experienced SEO collisions, and social comments were really not positive and really made fun of the brand. And it was really against us. We understood that the situation is going to stay, and we had no choice but to rename it again. And yeah, this is what we did. So you can see here on Google, like starting with COVID instead of Corvid. COVID tips that offering, you can see at the comments, why Corvid? Etc., etc. You can see like really, and so indeed, new brand was needed. Um, so we were looking for something that really reflects the values that we want to um, convey to our users: velocity, security, hyperspeed, professional, sophisticated, and reliable. These like are the main ones. And so within just 2 months, we created a whole new brand, a homepage, an acquisition video, and campaigns just for the newborn name. I would like to show you our video, and I hope you like it.
As you know, this is COVID, the virus. Now this is Corvid, a full-stack web development platform. What the hell is Corvid? Oh, is this another virus? Just give me a second. Corvid lets you use custom code to rapidly build professional web applications. No, COVID. Not COVID. No, we're talking about Corvid, like this. Ugh, damn it. You might have a branding problem on your hands. You think so, Phil? Yeah, calling a product Corbett is an excellent idea in 2020. Actually, we named it in 2019, before the pandemic, after this super intelligent bird. Bad name. I've never liked it, even before the pandemic. I need a bad thing. Wow, worst brand name ever. Copywriter. All right, we hear you. It's time for a new name. So now, 11 crazy months later, we present to you Velo. Smarter, faster, and definitely not a pandemic. Your move, Corona.
Cool. So what eventually we did here is that we decided that we don't want to fight it. Like, we had so many comments and even funny stuff that people say about the brand name of Corvid. And we just thought, like, why fight it? Let's listen to them. Obviously, we need to change. And they had such a great feedbacks, more funny, more less funny, but we want them to show them that we can evolve quickly, that we can listen, and we can always improve. And we invested in this acquisition and promoting it to many users and audiences. And I'm really glad to say that it was very successful. And the feedback and engagement were great. And we saw really growth upon newcomers and more visits to our documentation and during and after this campaign. So this video was really successful from different angles, and I'm really grateful to be part of this. We just wanted to show our users that we do listen to them. They had so much great input and feedback, and it was so funny also. So why not use it? Why not to show them that we can evolve and we can listen to them at the same time? So we really invested in this, and there was a big engagement, and we really have seen a growth of newcomers and even more visits of existing users to our resources. And this was a great KPI to achieve. Another thing is the website. We created a new different website, obviously. We wanted to show a different kind of professionalized way and a little bit more down to earth. And it was really amazing process of curating the intent into this homepage. And our design team had made an amazing job about it. So I'm very grateful for this. So another thing that we did was creating a new improved development experience. It's not enough just to change your brand. You need to always listen to your users, as you said, but also to give them like the experience. When it comes to developers, it's so essential to give them a development experience, something that can relate to, something that they can, that will look familiar to them from different kind of tools that they are already using, right? So, for instance, as you can see here, this what used to be our old interface. You have the code editor, you have the left tree, like in databases, and as you can see, it's really simplified, but it was really the beginning. It was Corvid, and then again, we created a new interface that really talks more in a language that they understand. It shows more what the types of different files and does and allows them to use multiple tabs. Like, it really brings more the essentials that developers need in order to develop much faster and to have a full dev cycle. So, and the feedback also was really great, and we are very happy with this. So we have also few lessons learned, obviously, from this campaign. So Besides the fact that users do care about brand, I guess, because our existing users were so much more prouder to show to talk about Velo and being a Velo developer instead of a COVID developer. Um, with they're really standing behind the brand name, and we learned a lot from it. So eventually, you don't want to let your brand name sound like a pandemic, right? This is something that you want to avoid, obviously. You always have to listen to your audience, like give them what they want, like, and you should talk with them and always learn about them. And knowing your audience is like the key to really grow and become successful in marketing and product eventually. Don't be afraid to admit a mistake. Yes, our rebranding to Corvid was not successful that much, but it was also a coincidence. But then again, it was a mistake. We admitted it, and it just turned out to be amazing. We always, and the fourth one was to always be straightforward with your audience. Try to always give, like to talk in the level that they understand, not to overpromise, obviously, and to talk in the same eye level, and to really give them the main values and that they can have from your product, that your product offers, obviously. And so when we talk about ways to change perception in general, I would say there are so many ways, but we really use rebranding. We did acquisition videos. We are doing partnerships with thought leaders. It's very important when you want to change perception and when you want to improve your brand is to be where the big players are and to be next to these players. Obviously, with sponsorship, a lot of events, and you need to be careful also. Try to find which one do you want to do. Not all of them are successful, but it depends what your KPI is. You always need to understand what your KPI is, whether it's awareness and exposure, or you truly want to have leads and signups. This will help you think about how much money you put and where you invest. And obviously, education. Education is so important. You need to create, and developers like videos, but they like articles as well, and they like blog posts. So you need to combine an effort in all of these channels to really educate them and show them, and also through influencers, like what can you really do, and don't think that they will always find everything by themselves. So this is about also education. And the most important that evolve kind of everything inside is the inbound marketing. When you have a big chunk of users that don't use a specific feature or product within your big company, it depends. Maybe you have only one product in the company, it depends. But if you have a multiple, always take advantage of your existing users and try to use these inbound marketing campaigns to really drive the growth of a healthy growth of successful users, of happy users, and they will help you to grow. Once they're happy and they're successful, it resonates within the next audience and other companions and friends and colleagues everywhere. So what we did essentially, we put this goals in front of us, what we want to make, where we are successful, and what we want to achieve in this perception and marketing campaigns that we want to do, perception changes. It's always important that to always stick with your audience while nurturing your professionals and always learning from your community and to learn what made them so successful in order to replicate it. So as you can see, with these goals that we put, so once we put them in front of us, it's much more easier to create our tasks for the team. So what we did all the way on the was putting these goals and translate them to KPIs eventually. Um, and when you create your KPI, you translate these goals to KPIs. There are a few things that you need to take in consideration. You always have to be focused. I know it sounds like cliche, but really, it depends how much resource you have or how much your company is willing to invest. But focusing on what's successful, focusing means after testing and understanding what it works, also you need to focus what you are trying to achieve. You understand your goals and what you're trying to achieve. Measurable, another thing that we found different creatives and different ways to monitor our activities of users. Make sure that like whatever you can is measurable, and find ways to monitor it. Sometimes it's hard, but you can always find workaround. And this is your job as PMMs or marketers, is to always find a solution, whether if it exists or not. Make your KPIs reachable. Don't put numbers that are just pretty. Like eventually your managers will not be satisfied. You will not be. You will be very unsatisfied, and it could really harm you and the team. So setting up a KPI that can be actually reachable and attainable. It's a really key to grow, even if it's slower but safer. And obviously, make it sure that it's time bound. And this KPI needs to be reachable within a certain amount of time. Cool. So nowadays, I just want to say that we're putting a lot of effort in bringing also users to Wix and convert them to Velo users, but we put a lot of effort now in educating and transferring or converting more users into working with Velo and add code, and in their own way. We'll always try to find their way that they like, whether they're coders or whether they're not, just to make sure that they're successful and try to understand what they're doing, obviously, but to help them achieve what they need for their website or business using Velo or Wix, essentially. So a few takeouts that I would like to share with you from all this almost 3 years in Wix and doing product marketing for Velo is that invest in your inbound. This is obviously where you will get most of the growth when it comes to SaaS platforms, and it really depends, but I really believe in that. So the second one is listen to the market, but mostly to your users' intent. This is so important. Like, you need to listen to the market, but your users will give you most of the answers or what's next or what they need and how to make them successful. So this is like the key. Like, keep repeating it, but listen to the intent, what they try to achieve. Educate your audience in the way they like. As I said a few times, like, not everyone likes the same resources. So it's really important to find the right one and make a diversity or a variety of resources that they can use. Don't pretend or overpromise anything to your audience. Obviously, you don't want to fail them, and you don't want them to feel like they were overpromised and they cannot achieve the stuff that they are trying to achieve. Lastly, keep your goals and KPIs focused. It's really, really helpful when you're dealing with new audience or a more professional audience or more sophisticated audience or everywhere, like, to keep your goals and KPI focused so you can achieve what you're trying to achieve now. And if you want to focus on growth, focus on growth. If you want to focus on make them more successful, try to put it, depends on your obviously resources, but try to keep focus on your team and your goals. And that's it. Hope you enjoyed. I hope I helped with some points and that our story will inspire you. And thank you so much.
Hello, wherever you are joining us from today, I want to say a huge welcome to our global community. We hope you're enjoying the Developer Marketing Summit. I also want to send out an extra special thank you to all our sponsors, partners, and speakers who together have made this event possible. I hope you are finding today's sessions insightful, and I want to remind you that the learnings don't stop here. If you haven't already, you can become a PMA member or upgrade to an Access All Areas Pass to benefit from unlimited access to all today's content. What's more, you can continue the conversation in the PMA's Slack community. If you aren't already a member, then hop on over and join the discussions today. And remember, this is your chance to get involved. Please share your feedback and questions in the comment section for our speakers to answer. It really is that simple. Let's resume the sessions.
Hey everyone, I'm Knuppe, Product Marketing Lead at Mollie, and welcome to my presentation where today I'll be talking about a topic I'm extremely fanatical about, which is go-to-market, and more specifically, how to launch an API into a market or several markets and keep it there. You might be wondering, what do you mean by keep it there? And by this, I mean how to drive initial market adoption and usage of an API, and adoption really meaning successful completion and integration of an API by a customer, and usage meaning repeat API calls between systems. A bit about me. So my career spans across various consumer tech companies where I've been fortunate enough to be part of and lead incredibly agile growth, brand, and product marketing disciplines. Outside of the office, as much as I like to eat, I love exercising and believe that both are an important part of how we remain sane whilst working in hyper-growth environments. And some sleep is probably important from time to time too. A bit about Mollie. We're a European online payment service provider. We reduce the complexity of payments for over 120,000 customers across Europe. We've recently raised 800 million in Series C funding, which will help diversify our product offering, accelerate our pan-European expansion, and solidify our positioning as the most loved payment service provider in Europe. We're also hiring a lot. So what we'll discuss today is we'll wind the clock back to basics and explore what exactly is GTM and why should we care? How does one go about building a bulletproof GTM framework? Writing a killer value proposition for something like an API, which is inherently quite technical. What we'll do there is really look at the value proposition framework and the key things that I believe one should take from a framework and implement into a value prop. The role of sales and marketing in GTM. So two key components to drive the success of a go-to-market. How to measure success when launching an API. That's really looking at the types of metrics and measurement you want to use when looking at adoption and usage. And then finally, closing the feedback loop between customer, market, and competitor. You might look at some of these slides and think, wow, that's a lot of information. And yes, it will be. But these will also be made available after the presentation for your own personal consumption. And hopefully, if I make any sense today, you might use them too. So what is GTM? Please excuse my rocket ship space theme. Whilst I personally have never launched a rocket or been into space, I think that there are some basic principles and themes that we can apply to go-to-market presentation, and some are also purely used for inspirational purposes. Go-to-market is an extremely hot topic, verbalized across multiple departments, and it can take many shapes and forms depending on whether you're a startup, scale-up, or enterprise tech company. So today I'll be talking about go-to-market in both a generalist context and also a hyper-growth B2B context, indulging you in a little bit about how we do GTM at Mollie. So how do we define GTM? And according to the internet, Go-to-market or go-to-market strategy is the plan of an organization utilizing their outside resources to deliver their unique value proposition to customers. I'm not going to finish this because after doing quite a bit of research on what's out there, I felt that this was extremely irrelevant and out of touch of what go-to-market really is. So I created my own version. Go-to-market is the overarching framework which details the key stakeholders, milestones, metrics, and deliverables a company cohesively follows in order to test and validate the market opportunity, readiness, and positioning of a company's product or service targeted at a predetermined customer segment. Now, of course, this is open to interpretation. And what I really want you to take away is that go-to-market is the overarching process of many sub-processes, all being targeted and pointed in the same direction with the goal of delivering the same result. So in my mind, that's really understanding how do we establish product market fit. I probably could have written this out too, but I felt it was extremely high level. So, now that we've explored the definition of GTM, at least in my opinion, how do you structure GTM in your world? As we know, it can change in duration, structure, B2B, B2D, business to developer, or B2C, markets and audiences. And I think understanding the difference between the types of GTM which apply to your product or feature launches enables you to progress building out your GTM framework and educating stakeholders how GTM is done and the time required to execute it well. So at Mollie, we have 3 different tiers, namely to help manage expectations on when we require stakeholders' input, how much bandwidth the team has to deliver against the relevant timelines associated to the different product launches. So this might not be applicable to everyone in the presentation, but I would suggest you use high-level parameters to help determine the tiers of GTM that you have. What I found is quite useful is to use 4 parameters, namely, so audience cohort, who are we targeting, the channel mix, so what channels are we reaching them on, is it owned, is it earned, is it paid, the stakeholders that we need to keep informed and consulted, the outcomes, so what can we expect? This is where we would typically add metrics and measurement, and then the duration, so how long will a GTM take from kickoff all the way through to retrospective? So I think if you understand the fundamentals of why we use a framework to launch products, it helps communicate to all the necessary stakeholders involved and the milestones which need to be achieved. So what does a GTM framework look like? And I've used an example of a tier 2 GTM framework to help illustrate how this framework within Mollie is used to steer our GTM efforts forward. So don't be alarmed by the little black boxes, as these are merely sanity checks to ensure that all things are moving forward and in the right direction. I haven't added timings to this, as it can vary depending on the type of product you're launching, or in this case, an API, and these would be typical milestones that I would include. And if you really start at the beginning in the ideation phase, this is really all about determining the feasibility of an API. So why do customers need it? What is the market demand, or at least perceived demand, and how would we go about launching this? And there's multiple validation steps when launching an API that I will include and I will point out accordingly. And as you move forward through the scope of your technical specifications, your development timelines, you might be thinking that that's not really part of a GTM, but this is an overarching framework that I'm sharing. And what we will really focus on is the key points of validation and feedback when launching an API. And one of the key things I think to discuss is also understanding where you're launching your API to. So your API is plugging into an external environment. What does that environment look like? How is data being surfaced and visualized? And this is something that's not often always considered. So I think in my opinion, one of the most important things about GTM is stakeholder expectation management. And really it comes down to identifying who your key stakeholders are. And if you look at this representation, it's quite extensive. I mean, throughout any GTM, you're really touching on marketing, sales, customer support, customer success. You're working with product engineering on revising the timelines. And really what you want to do is understand what are the key learnings and hypothesis going into a beta test, and what do you want to understand coming out of that. And from the beta, I would say one of the key areas is also understanding the approvals and green lights from legal and compliance. That's definitely an extremely important checkpoint, at least within fintech, because the last thing you want to do is be going live or preparing for a launch meeting and they haven't been included, and the outcome is not pretty. I've been there before. You definitely want to make sure that your legal and compliance or security and risk stakeholders are included earlier on. So, if we think about it, this is quite a lot of information. So how can we distill this and make it a lot easier to understand and take it in a step-by-step phased approach? And I believe that if we had to look at a GTM, there are 4 core phases. So discovery phase, have identified all my stakeholders. We use a Iraqi framework. Is the problem statement and solution offering clearly explained? Does everyone understand the why we are doing this and what impact is it going to have? And another point is, have we clearly defined and sized the opportunities so that stakeholders know why we are launching the product, which is the audience, what type of market share do we want to go after, what level of revenue attribution will this API deliver? The second phase is validation. So beta tests maybe sometimes aren't always a requirement, but they add a huge amount of value when stress testing the product and future-proofing your launch material. So beta is not just necessarily learning about the technical insights, but also using your beta customers to understand, do they resonate with the value proposition? How did they understand the technical documentation? How far do we go to help them with understanding how to design and visualize the user interface on their end to ensure that the information is being surfaced in the most optimal way? And then preparation. So taking all the learnings from beta and implementing them prior to your soft launch or hard launch phase so that your GTM material is airtight and that your team is tracking the right metrics. And then finally, launch and iteration. So your soft launch phase can be either a single market focus or multi-market. We typically launch in one market and test the adoption. And then if everything is green light there, we roll out across additional markets in a sequential manner. And then the iteration part is really focused on leveraging both the internal and external insights from your previous data points to help make more informed decisions as your product adoption and usage starts to grow. So something that's super important that I think we sometimes neglect or ignore is understanding the roles of sales and marketing. And in my experience, sales and marketing counterparts play a crucial role, not only launching your API, but driving initial market adoption and, more importantly, feedback and insights with supporting qualitative and quantitative data. And these are where the feedback loops come into play, and not just how critical they are in understanding how to establish product market fit, but also ensuring that the insights that you retrieve and distill is circulated with all your key stakeholders. If you think about the types of questions that a GTM plan should answer, you really need to be a little bit empathetic to your sales and marketing teams and really understand what role will they play and how can you help guide them. And if we had to start with product marketing, what I would typically be asking myself is, how have we quantified the demand for a new product, feature, or market? Who are we targeting? What is our message and unique selling proposition? Have we defined the right personas and decision makers? Who are the key stakeholders in our GTM? Which customers are we co-launching with from our beta? And what supporting product material do we need to create in order to create an impactful launch? And if you had to think about understanding what questions our sales teams would ask is, what material do we have to sell our products and how has it been localized? So something that's extremely important when you're dealing in multinational markets is really understanding how do you localize and locally contextualize the material that you're helping with your sales teams. And that can typically go as far as, for example, if we're showing or wanting to pitch to a new customer that is in retail in Germany, we would really like to use proof points or references of previous retail customers in that region that they can resonate with. So how have we defined the legibility of our targeted customers? So what kind of profiles are we going after? Is it based on revenue? Is it based on vertical? And how have we forecasted the acquisition plan? So when aligning with sales and understanding the types of perceived demand for whether it be a new product or a product that you're just launching in order to ensure that you're aligned with your competitor product offering, what are sales seeing in the market that maybe you're not exposed to? And how can we help, again, create material that can help them attract, convert, and win new customers? What does the customer onboarding look like? So something extremely important when looking at signing up a new customer. There's multiple things that you look at onboarding, whether it be risk, compliance, regulatory environment. One of the most important things that I think we need to be mindful of is when launching an API is that some customers can, totally autonomously read the documentation and complete the integration within a week, maybe even faster, whereas others can take 4 to 5 weeks. So really, what does that cycle look like, and what can we do to help accelerate it? What is our pricing strategy? So how does our pricing compare to competitors? Are we above? Are we below market? Are we aligned? Is there negotiation room? These are all things that sales definitely need to better understand what their role is and how can they, play a part in GTM. And then marketing. So when does marketing need to get involved? Is it pre-GTM? Is it soft launch? And what are marketing stakeholders? Is it content marketing, digital marketing, performance marketing, or all of them? What kind of content do we want to market our product with locally? So do we do animation? Do we do sales team one pages? Do we do paid media, website landing page? And then what are the audience demographics? And this is more specifically on the performance marketing side for targeting. And then what supporting marketing do we need? So again, it goes back to, what is the channel strategy, digital PR, thought leadership. And really, once you've been able to answer these questions, it creates a much clearer picture for understanding who does what, when, and how, and where with your sales and marketing team counterparts. So writing a killer value proposition. So value proposition is one of those phrases like paradigm shift and synergy that started out as a good idea, but then was so overused that a lot of people don't really understand the importance of it. And I think a good place to start is how not to write a value proposition. And in my experience, don't create a value proposition based on internal biases or anecdotal feedback, as this is not representative of your customer's need state or attractive to your customer's intent. Try avoid making baseless claims. So making no use of data to back up your messaging. And I would really focus on 3 things. And, if we look at the typical value proposition canvas, so something that I've used multiple times, and it's really easy to use when workshopping new teams, sometimes you only really need to focus on 2 or 3 things. And for me, it's really, how have we identified the customer gains? So what makes their lives easier? Then understanding the pains. So what do they hate about their jobs to be done? Is it because they are time scarce or they have lack of developer capacity? And once you understand those, you need to align the pains and gains to the product features. Sometimes you may have 7 features, other times you may have 2 features. But what this does is it really addresses the simplicity of how you are marrying your product offering or product or feature offering to the customer's needs. And as an outcome, what are we giving them? So how are we making their lives easier? Something that I found is crucial in the value proposition development stage is how to validate these claims. So 9 times out of 10, what I've believed is a kick-ass value prop, like really thought I nailed it, it changed several times before we got to launch. And that was purely because we just iterated and iterated with new customers joining the beta and them giving their feedback on what resonates strongly, what type of words do they find compelling versus statements that are just baseless. Measuring success. So measurement and metrics, these mystical things that we speak about like North Star metrics and so on. What I'll be talking you through the next few slides is may come across as a bit overwhelming, but rightfully so. There are heaps of metrics that you need to consider when launching an API. So how I like to approach measurement and metrics is start very broad. And an example is to categorize the different metrics so you anticipate measuring. And again, I would treat this as an initial shopping list for yourself and your data analyst if you have that luxury. And typically, for an API, we focus on product performance. And what that really means is bottom of funnel. So a term that I like to use is vanity, sanity, reality. And some of you may have heard this phrase before, or may have heard it in a different context. And why I really like using it is that when launching an API, you really want to focus on the reality. So, and maybe some sanity, but really like, what kind of adoption are we seeing, what's driving adoption, and what's inhibiting adoption. And that's really getting down to understanding, and again, to those feedback loops, is understanding what are customers seeing, why are they dropping off, what's extending their time to integration. And if we had to classify some of the signals that we look for in determining a healthy GTM, so that's launch metrics, API adoption, and time to integrate. Product revenue indicators, so attribution to TLR, BLR, and customer lifetime value. Product usage, so revenue attribution per API call. This is something that is extremely technical and quite hard to determine, but it is possible. So customer happiness, how are you engaging with customers once they've integrated or completed an integration? Is it with customer effort score or net promoter score? And then your win rates. So how quickly are sales teams closing, and what is their lead to conversion percentage? I think that if you had to look at the way that we go from a channel perspective, so this is kind of just really understanding how do we define owned, earned, and paid, and what are the types of channels that exist, and the metrics that we use to assess them. This is something more when you're looking at further down the GTM plan on the execution side, but still very relevant to understanding kind of the full funnel reporting of how your GTM is performing. So closing the feedback loop. So you've launched an API, there are early adopter signals, they're looking promising, but when do you close the feedback loop, and who do you close it with? So something that is a lot easier said than done. And really, there are feedback loops throughout your GTM lifecycle. And sometimes, if it's a big GTM, like a tier 2 or tier 3, as I mentioned, you're going to have feedback after beta, you're going to have feedback after launch, you're going to have feedback after hard launch. And it's an ongoing process. And you really need to determine who drives this and which stakeholders are anticipating the learnings. And more importantly, what do you do with the learning? So yes, you've compiled feedback, but then what next? So how are you really optimizing your product and offering? And more importantly, also from a GTM perspective, your messaging. How are you continuously iterating in the different markets? Like, when we launched an API in Germany, the value proposition was somewhat different to how we launched that same API in France, because the wording resonates differently when you look at it linguistically. So what can you take away from today? I think, how to launch an API into a market. I think, a few key lessons was, clearly define your problem and opportunity, build your stakeholder matrix, validate your messaging and material, and a sequential phased rollout. So really to try and mitigate risk and customer support inbound, taking a sequential phased approach really kind of helps you mitigate those things. And then how do you keep your API in the market? So fast feedback loops between sales, support, and marketing, bottom of funnel measurement, as we discussed, so more focused on the sanity and reality, and ongoing research with customers. So really, drive that culture of being customer obsessed. Thanks so much. I hope that you found this enlightening and informative. I really enjoyed talking about this topic. If you have any questions, or if you'd like to go through some of the material, please don't hesitate to reach out to me on LinkedIn. Hope you have a great week.
Talk with any product-focused team at an enterprise technology company and they'll share the same story. They know they need a vibrant user community to spur product adoption and growth. But what they don't know is the best way to build, manage, and grow one. How do they connect with current and prospective users at scale? Do they build their own community? Do they join existing communities? There's an easier way. Collectives on Stack Overflow helps you unlock the power of your community. You can reach and engage millions of developers on Stack Overflow and connect with those interested in your technology. Share knowledge and support users of your products, and drive growth through actionable data and insights. Ready to unlock the power of your community? Visit collectivesonstackoverflow.com today.
Being an amazing product marketing leader doesn't happen by chance. It happens by habit. Product marketing certified leadership has been built on the back of decades worth of experience from some of the world's best known brands with one goal in mind: helping you be the best leader you can be. Crammed with real-life case studies, over 12 hours worth of content, templates, exams, and more, this course is everything you need to lead with authority, confidence, influence, and innovation. Every piece of material within the 7 modules and 29 chapters has been vetted, tested, and approved by senior level product marketers from companies like Amazon, Uber, and HubSpot, serving up game-changing insights throughout. By the time you've wrapped up the final module, you'll be able to define what it takes to be a great product marketing leader, build and scale your team, understand how to successfully manage your existing team, use methods for leveraging data, know how to become the voice of the customer, understand how teams work cross-functionally, and improve your strategic thinking. The beauty of the course is you'll have the freedom to work your way through the modules at a pace to suit you. It's 100% self-paced. You'll even get lifetime access to the curriculum, paving the way for refresher sessions forevermore. Visit productmarketingalliance.com to get leadership certified and spearhead your journey to the top.
Hi everyone, I hope you're all enjoying DevMarcon, the first developer marketing summit from the Product Marketing Alliance. Before we dive into the next session, I just wanted to let you know about an exciting opportunity we are opening up to you all today. We are on the lookout for our first developer marketing ambassadors to come and join us as founding members of this new community. As well as helping us shape our content, events, and training courses, our ambassadors also receive a whole host of fantastic benefits, including a complimentary PMA membership. Keep an eye on the comment section as we'll be posting more info and the link to apply now. If you have any questions, you can come and find me in the PMA Slack community and I'll be happy to share more information. Hi everyone, and a very warm welcome to DevMarcon, the first developer marketing summit from the PMA. Thank you so much for tuning in today. We hope you enjoy the sessions that we have lined up for you. With expert presentations, specialist fireside chats, and deep dive panel discussions on the agenda, suffice to say, you're in for a treat. Just before we jump in, I want to take a moment to thank everyone who's played a part in making this event possible. Our sponsors, partners, speakers, and of course you, the Product Marketing Alliance community. You can engage with all our speakers and their sessions today by posting your questions in the comments section of the broadcast, or you can reach out to them in the Developer Marketing channel in our Slack community. Remember, you can also catch up with all the day's content on demand, plus a whole host of other amazing benefits by becoming a PMA member. But for now, it gives me great pleasure to introduce our next session.
So welcome everyone to panel today is Marketing Invisible Products, APIs to some, to a technical audience. The session today, my name's Keith Brooks. I'm going to be moderating the panel. And with us today, we've got Ronak Ganatra from GraphCMS, Breann Harper from HackerRank, and Adam Sturrock from Amplience. Hopefully I pronounced that properly. My background, just to give a quick intro, is I'm the CEO for B2B Whisper. I work with companies on their B2B marketing and their approach to the US and European markets. Historically, I've worked in a lot of verticals, a lot of different places around the world, most notably for a long time with IBM and IBM partners in the marketing space. Let Adam fill you in on his background.
Thanks very much, Keith. I'm Adam Sturrock, as you kindly mentioned, VP of Product Marketing here at Amplience. Amplience provides a headless CMS DAM sort of DXP platform for leading enterprise retailers and brands. Before Amplience, I was the founder of a e-commerce platform, a headless e-commerce platform, back in 2013 till 2019 that was acquired at the end of 2019. That's me.
Okay, Breann. Oh, are you on mute? Or am I?
Hands on mute. Yeah.
Hey, see, I was trying to be prepared for a dog bark, but no. I'm Breann Harper. I am the Senior Product Marketing Manager at HackerRank. We are a technology hiring platform. We help companies really assess and hire the best technical talent, meaning we really focus on developer roles. Before that, I have worked the gamut of marketing platforms, data as a platform. So yeah, I am excited about the conversation today.
Great. And Ronak?
Sure. Yeah, I'll end it. So I'm Ronak. I'm the VP of Marketing here at GraphCMS. It's a very similar space to the one Adam operates in. We too are a headless content API based on GraphQL. So developers are able to go ahead and build their omni-channel experiences, and content editors can go ahead and work with the UI to sort of define what those experiences are for their end users. And yeah, just based in Berlin, looking forward to this conversation with you all.
Okay, that's good to hear. So one of the things, I don't know about the three of you, but for me, when I reached out to the team at the time, and they asked me if I would moderate this panel, actually they asked me which panel would I want to moderate. And I said, this sounded really interesting because my background in working with IBM and some other products was a lot of times you're dealing with products people never see. You know, we're dealing with back-end databases or some other, aspects of environments that 99% of the world never sees or hears or knows about. And I thought, this would be a great thing because everyone's always talking about marketing. We can do this, we can do that, and we can sell this and sell that. How do you sell something people really don't see? And who are we really trying to reach to when we're trying to sell these products, or how are we trying to reach them? And I know from our discussions we've had before this webinar, we've all kind of had similar kind of perspectives on this. And so I figured it's probably a good place to start with, how do each of you see that target audience? How are you trying to reach them, or what do you think is a good way to get there? And I think, from there, we'll be able to jump to many other discussions. So starting just for the moment, just simple alphabetical, I'll start with Adam.
So for Amplience, and maybe this goes for many organizations, like the developer is an implementer, a key influencer within the decision-making process, within that implementation process. So that's one persona, and they're typically connecting the dots between sort of business requirements, what the business is trying to achieve, and the actual execution of that. So they're typically quite good at figuring out what an API is sort of capable of and creating solutions from that. But when it comes to sort of other personas, when you're trying to market, an API-based product, they need to be sort of armed with the information, not just from a technical level, what are the APIs, but more sort of out of the possible, what can you do with the APIs? What are the solutions? What are the examples? What are the, the case studies, the customer stories that they can sort of paint the picture of where they could be in the future. So whilst you could have, a great developer experience, SDKs, getting started projects, assets to get developers up and running quickly, in an open, transparent way. At the same time, you need to be sort of thinking about the other personas too, as you market an invisible product, which is quite the challenge.
Yeah, it is. That's true. How about you, Breann?
Yeah, I know at HackerRank we have a few personas, but the ones that I feel I focus more on are the hiring managers, which tend to be an engineer or a developer currently because they are hiring engineers or developers, right? And so I'm in this unique situation where I guess I'm selling to and also helping that person hire their exact persona, which is a really unique thing. In the past, when I've worked with data scientists or people who are really accessing data, I would really just highlight what Adam said, which is, what are they getting from this API, right? And by that, I mean, what problem are they able to alleviate, or what data are they going to be able to access that helps them? So when thinking about the persona, I really come in from like a pain point first perspective. What problem am I trying to solve? I feel like with developers in particular, that tends to lead well because they don't really want marketing fluff. So just getting straight to the point of what they're going to get, I think tends to be a good approach.
Yeah, that's for sure. Developers do not like marketing fluff. I think we can all agree on that one. All right, Ronak, how about you?
Yeah, I mean, for us as well, I would say that there's two key personas. So one is the developer itself, who's sort of evaluating the product, seeing whether it solves their purpose or what they're trying to build. And on the other side, we sort of club the commercial personas a bit together, where you have the marketing team, you have the business team, sometimes you have the compliance or the finance team joining in. And for us, it's kind of that classic marketing argument, right? Do you go features versus benefits? And what we found is for the developers, going with the features first really works in our favor because it's very objective. It's to the point. You're really cutting through all the fluff and not making up any problems that you think they may have. So they go straight to the docs. They go check out exactly what the product can do, what the capabilities are. Versus on the other side, when we speak with the more commercial personas, that's where we try to contextualize the problems from other customers or from other conversations we've had and try to give them more of a, this is the overall value, and this is kind of how your development team's going to just implement what's with the API.
Okay.
It's kind of like the classic what, how, why.
Yeah.
Business users want to start with the why, and the developers care about what it is and the how,
yeah.
but they don't care about the why because they've got the context already.
Yeah, they know why.
Yeah.
Right. So, in general, do you think that we're dealing with, are you aiming at existing customers, or are you trying to aim at customers you don't have yet for your products? Just from a curiosity perspective of my own.
Is that who's that targeted at? Me? Is that me? I've got
well, if you want, I was going to ask
You go
Breann
first.
if she wants, but if you're diving into it, go ahead.
For Amplience, it's both. So we've got sort of older product lines. We've got a digital asset management platform where we have an existing customer base on, and we have to try and upsell those into our CMS product, our DXP. So we're trying to, they've bought Amplience for one thing, and we're trying to figure out how do we migrate them across to a new product, which that is a straight up like new sale. It's not just an upgrade. And then on the flip side, we do have obviously new customers. So we've got a pretty good customer base in the UK, and we're now heading into the US market predominantly. That's where sort of we see our expansion. And we sort of have a ICP profile in that e-commerce retail space with like sort of outer rings of that. Whereas some of our competitors are a bit more broad in their approach of the use cases that they cater towards. We try and focus in on a vertical, and that vertical also helps with the solutions that people want to see, what is possible with those APIs, and that also shapes our roadmap as well, in terms of where do we invest in the product, because obviously like a broad roadmap can affect the product, like the details of the product and the APIs and what the capabilities are. Where that deep focus for us is interesting, because we don't just focus on that developer persona. We try to, just like Ronak said, we try to build out sort of the other personas and profiles too, because in this API based world, people end up living inside of a dozen or more tools and management interfaces, and that's not a great user experience for the non-technical personas. But I feel like for the purposes of this panel, maybe focusing more in on the developer persona is probably more relevant, given that's how you really drive, I guess, the grease in the wheels for sort of go to market for API based products, at least.
Yeah, I would say typically most companies I've worked for in the past have obviously, sold towards prospects, because you always need new customers, right? You want to build your brand and you want to grow your product awareness and all that stuff. But I think there's always been this big focus too on customers. And I think that's really where the value of roadmaps come in too, right? So the purpose of building a roadmap is that you keep your existing customers happy and hopefully grow them. If there's other, let's say you're a larger company like IBM, right? Obviously there's multiple segments in IBM. And so you're constantly trying to buy, sell into other things. And sometimes the best way to do that is through your own customers that you already have within the company. And so, and sometimes the API sell isn't always to the developer, to be honest. Like sometimes the person who's actually accessing the data that comes from the API would be someone else. And so I think there's this constant the developer or the engineer is probably going to be the person who implements it. And so there's definitely value in selling to them, but the person who uses it may or may not be that same developer engineer.
That's for sure. Ronak, you have anything you want to add to that?
I just want to double down on what Breann said as well. Like taking the example of IBM, it makes complete sense, because marketing does tend to focus a lot on acquiring new logos. But then when you have companies of that size, it's obviously a huge risk for them to just choose a new tool and move all their business to it, from the get-go. So a lot of the effort that we put in with the roadmap and the feature rollouts when we have those announcements and new documentation really also has to do for the customer success team or the partnerships team to really have those follow-up conversations with existing customers and see how we can expand within other functions of their business or other products that they want to launch.
I was just going to say, selling is also retention, and retention affects churn, right? And so, that's what I was saying.
So this brings up a question, when you get into sales enablement or training in these kind of ideas, who do you want to have go out there and present on these APIs or the topics? Because some companies, it falls into product marketing. Product marketing doesn't always have the technical skills to actually, discuss these things in a way that makes sense to people, especially if they're doing a business session. On the flip side, a lot of times you want developers to do it, but then sometimes the people going to that event aren't necessarily the developers themselves. So do you have a preference, or do you have a way that you prefer people give this information across in the conferences or webinars or events they do? And does your company have a I won't say a detailed plan, but like, do you have certain expectations when you hire people to meet those demands? And I'll start with Ronak this time.
Okay.
Sure.
Sorry, Adam.
Fine, go ahead.
I mean, there's certainly that expectation when we onboard new colleagues, right? Like, they do have to come with a certain, even though they're not developers, they need to have a certain technical background or have worked with technical products in the past. But I think it really depends on what the conversation is and what the use case is at the end of the day. So, for example, our sales team, and I mean direct sales and partnerships, they've all had extensive product walkthroughs. They've all tested the product. They've all tried to build an end experience with the product. So I would say that they are very fluent in having that conversation, even if it's the technical persona on the other side. And the same with the customer success team. But obviously, you have certain instances where you're advising someone on what their stack could be or how to migrate from an existing solution, and you need to get into the details. And I would say that's when solutions engineering or developer relations comes into the picture and joins the commercial team on that conversation, but that's already when you're having those conversations, right? Whereas at the very beginning, if we're looking at the top of the funnel, just to put it in context, yes, product marketing plays a huge role. Same with content and social or any other community platforms that you're sort of involved in. And even here, I would say that it is an expectation within our team that everyone within the marketing team has a certain technical fluency with the product and the space we operate in, even if they're not programming, just so they can put those sort of problems or conversations into context.
Yep, that sounds good. Okay, Adam, we'll let you at it.
I was just going to talk about sort of like the side that you mentioned about sort of the organizational structure, and kind of leading off of Ronak's point. Depending on where you place resources will depend on sort of the KPIs, the outcomes, the things that role is going to be driving for. So a lot of roles are very important at various stages in that customer life cycle. So solution engineering, when you're getting into solutioning with a customer and showing demos and building proof of concepts, that's sort of a very key point for developer to developer sales, where a developer is trying to figure out, is your API the right solution? And you wanting to sort of pair off those technical resources. From further up the funnel, you've got developer marketing, where you're trying to produce content. A developer evangelist could be doing that, or developer relations, building out that community. So the job titles is an interesting one, and there's a little bit of fluidity between them. In a past life at my last company, that reported into marketing, and that kind of shaped and shifted the goals, and in some ways polluted the authenticity because it became sort of commercial in some ways. And I feel like to authentically market an API, especially to a developer audience who's quite cynical about marketing and sales generally, you want to separate them as much as possible. But at the same time, from an internal selfish business perspective, you're trying to drive some sort of growth. So that's the sort of the balance that you've got to try and get. And I feel like product marketing's in a nice sweet spot where it's playing that supporting role to enable success of for your organization and your customer base. And it can be a little bit more collaborative and a little bit less strictly, I'm driving commercial milestones. So for Amplience and for where I'm kind of a bit of a plug, and I know Ronak's got a bit of a plug too. But yeah, we're hiring at the moment, and it's going to be reporting and rolling up into me the sort of developer evangelist role, and that'll give us some freedom into how we think about measurement of success and how do we drive to those objectives. Yeah.
Okay. For those out there, and now you've heard it, Adam's hiring. Okay, Breann.
I was just going to get back real quick on Adam's statements about the organizational stuff. And I think it's gray lines, right? It also depends on company size. So if you are a larger organization, you might have the resources in place, right? To have a developer evangelist, to have a solutions engineer who is what we call the expert. When you're at a smaller startup company, that gets even more grade, because really just depend on who has the most expertise, right? So that could be a product manager. I've seen that a lot, right? So from product marketing perspective, I think when it comes to sales enablement, we tend to be a little bit heavier on the project management piece, right? Which is sourcing out the experts, finding the right people within the organization who can actually have some knowledge of what sales needs to be able to sell the product, but also the technical expertise, right? To be able to relay in layman's terms what that means. And I think that's really going to be, it's going to vary based on what size of company or organization you're in.
I could sort of echo that from my previous company in the early stages, where we had our engineering team sort of pairing off into sort of solution engineering and sales in some ways for the developer pairing off. And I think that's important. Like, I think, Ronak, you had sort of, your organization needs to have, you sort of have this in some ways a mandate, I guess, where you have, they need to have some technical understanding to be able to at least understand the concepts and be able to communicate those effectively, across the board from a technical standpoint. Which is useful, and I feel like that's true at Amplience too. It feels like you need to have that base level of competency for communicating about APIs and their benefits, and then you also end up splitting out based on personas, like to specific roles as your organization matures. Early on, obviously, I think you're completely right, Breann, that you end up having to merge them together because there isn't enough headcount, so you end up wearing multiple hats. Which is probably the right thing to do, because you'll also probably learn a lot more.
Yeah, but I think it also has to do with who you're having that conversation with, right? So when Breann mentioned that sometimes product or engineering would join, it makes a difference, because you can't expect one person from the sales team to be able to speak one-to-one with people from every possible department. So even if they have that technical knowledge, at some point, a product person is just going to know exactly what to say to another product person, and having people jump in and out really does smooth the process along as well.
Well, because they're the people who understand the value prop. They're the product managers are the ones who understand, why are we building this, right? Engineers build it, product marketers help sell it, but the product manager is really that role that says, here's who we're selling it to, this is why we're selling it, now fluff that up, right? And make that something that everyone can understand, and that's where product marketing bridges the gap between all of those different roles. And then sales enablement, because sometimes it falls in product marketing, sometimes it falls in sales. It's just so ambiguous sometimes.
Definitely. So in a kind of like the reverse opposite perspective, right? Because we talked about having personas for some of these and the people you want to go after, right? What are some of the worst practices or the worst marketing efforts you've seen that people have tried to pitch to you or your company from the API side? Because the people out there are probably sitting there going, we have no idea what we're doing, but we don't want to do it worse. I think most people have sculpted out, a developer. They all know, hey, we're going after this person, but what things kind of do you think turn people off from wanting to reach out to you, or whatever it might be that you've seen or heard or experienced that just really was not the way that you felt you wanted to be pitched to on this stuff? Does anybody want to go first with that one?
It's funny because I collect really bad emails. It's like one of my favorite, me and my boss, we pass around this was a really bad pitch. I wish I had some to pull out in the moment. I can't, but I tend to find, and this is where a developer would be great in this conference, someone who is a continuous developer, right? Who gets pitched to as a developer, not as a CEO or a VP or whatever, but just truly I manage APIs, right? I'd love to have someone like that, but I think short and sweet is always better. Get to the point. I can talk from what I do like to see, kind of switching it up here. I do like to see short and sweet, to the point, value prop, and then maybe an example. What I hate is when they think they know who you are because they did a 5-minute LinkedIn search on you, and then they completely kaboof it. Hey, Breann at Index. I'm I haven't worked at Index in 6 years. Why are you trying to sell me this? Know your audience, truly know who they are. If you're going to spend time and research them and then send them an email.
Yeah,
I would go back to that authenticity point that I made previously, where you got to treat, as you're building a relationship with a customer, and the developer is a customer, you should treat them with respect, and it's going to be a long-term commitment that they're buying a product from you and they're going to be relying on your APIs. So you need to think about versioning and how they're going to be able to upgrade over time. they're going to be, they're relying on your APIs to exist, for some considerable period of time. They're going to be building against it. Ideally, you're making their lives easier, not harder. So they don't want to experience like a rug pull after the fact. So there's got to be something in there around sort of the trust element of like the commitment from the business. It's not just a business strategy of like, we're going to market and we're going to get some developers in to drive some metrics. It's got to be a little bit more fundamental than that. It's got to be from from the heart. There's a great book by Jeff Lawson over at Twilio, Ask Your Developer. He wrote some great blog posts on LinkedIn as well around this sort of your last message to developers, where if you don't treat them with respect, if you trash the community, like there's no chance of ever winning them back, because developers will remember and they'll move on to somebody else. There are plenty of other products and APIs out there for them to select and buy from.
That's for sure. Ronak, you have anything you want to add?
No, I think ask your developer really makes sense, because I think even today, like I would say that the engineering team within GraphCMS is some of the biggest critics when it comes to the marketing we do. And I remember very early on, I was trying to just redo a lot of the stuff I've done, in previous companies, whether it comes to running ads or the emails that we do or the campaigns that we run. And everyone in the engineering team was like, I'm never going to click on this. I'm never going to engage with you if this goes out. And over time, I've come to realize that it makes sense, because most of my devs will never check their emails. They probably don't remember they have an inbox half the time. By default, they all have ad blockers. They don't care about the fluff or the claims that a company makes. All they want is like these really to the point, short and sweet messages that tell them, okay, this is what the product can do. Maybe a month later, this is the sort of new stuff that we've rolled out. This is how you figure it out. Here's the documentation. Do this with the SDK, just go and see how it works for you. So on the acquisition side, or starting a conversation, I found that it really needs to be as objective as possible. And then on the flip side, even when when you're speaking with an existing user as part of the community, the same principles apply. You're with them for the long term. So if someone's starting a conversation in your community Slack, if they can't figure out how to do something, or they've got a couple of wrong queries, jump in and help them. The sort of conversation doesn't end after they've signed up, or after they become a customer. They're really going to be with you for months, if not years. So you need to keep that constant effort and making sure that you're providing the best community experience or user experience to them. So yeah, I would say just no hacky stuff. Just, if it's something that you would read and you would want to buy, just say it the way it is, honestly and to the point.
And as marketers, we should have access to customers, right? As product marketers, we should have access to customers. And if your customer is a developer, going back to the ask your developer, try to schedule some time with a few customers and just ask them what works. Like, hey, when you get emails, what do you like to see? What do you don't like to see? Does email even affect you? Is there a better channel in which we could communicate with you, that our value prop and what we're offering? I think there should be some research that you get to do in your role as a product marketer.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. Like, having that access to customers, and it doesn't have to be just for marketing, like design can have a talk about UX. Customer success anyways has conversations all the time, and the feedback keeps coming in. But at times it's really important to just have that conversation and ask exactly what you want. And in most cases, I would say customers are willing to do this. I mean, they're as invested in the success of your product as you are, because they're relying on it. So there's nothing wrong in asking for it.
Yeah.
Right. What would, I don't know what all of you do individually, but what do your companies do as far as providing a community for the developers out there? Or if you want to look at it differently, if the developers are doing ad blocking and not reading their emails and not answering their phones or doing anything, how does your company go and find them? How do you reach out to them? Adam, you seem to always have some answer ready, so I'll let you go first.
It's interesting because like in my previous company, we were trying to go like developer first, go to market, and we were trying to do all kinds of like organic word of mouth presentations, attending sort of developer centric events to give talks and sort of help people like with like new trends and technologies. We did some like advertising on like Reddit and Stack Overflow, that kind of thing. That can work. That's where developers hang out and want to ask be active in the communities, answer questions that they have, be helpful. That's useful to kind of build that credibility and that voice, that presence in the market. We did run like on an ad network called Carbon Ads, which is dedicated to developer like tools and networks, so you can be sort of alongside other dev tools and design tools, which is useful. And they're a lot less in your face, so a little bit more subtle, so they're a bit more appreciative of the developer audience. We had mixed success with Carbon Ads. Trying to think like what else did we do? I think they're the main drivers, and then it's just a lot of inbound SEO in terms of like what is the developer's problem, what are they trying to solve for. What would I as a developer be Googling if I'm trying to problem solve or trying to evaluate technologies? So look at adjacent technologies. For APIs like the Jamstack, if you're going to latch onto like JavaScript frameworks, build landing pages around those, build assets around those. Don't just have a page with nothing on it. You want to give developers tools and examples in the code that in the languages that they work with. That works quite well. And I would also say, maybe to the last point a little bit, like what not to do. There's kind of like what to do. Like you need to keep your documentation open and accessible and transparent. Like developers are very much, they've got to see it to believe it. You can't just tell them. You can't smoke and mirrors demos or anything. It has to be real and tangible too. So like for Amplience, we're heading in that direction. I mean, we have open documentation. It's all accessible. We have trials, but you have to go through a form right now. It's not just self-service. And that also speaks to our enterprise centricity. Like it's very difficult for an enterprise centric company to build a community when all the customers are sworn by NDAs and don't want to talk about your products, that they use you because it could be a security risk, or some legal team somewhere is going to get mad. You can't use their logo, etc. So it can be difficult in the enterprise space, at least, to build a developer community. So that's something that I'm sort of mulling over at the moment, trying to figure out can we do that? How do we do that? Because that's very different to something that's more open and accessible to a broader part of the market, which we are heading more down mid-market, but it's hard to really build up that flywheel, that community, when the developers are sworn to secrecy.
That's true. Ronak, do you have any thoughts for that?
I'm not sharing the same problem as Adam on the market segment, but there are a lot of similarities. So again, for us, it's really important to be content first. And what I mean is everything we do is very publicly accessible. We focus heavily on content and SEO. Even some of the more classical resources with ebooks and webinars, we've opened a lot of those up because we found that it's not only for the ranking, but the information in there doesn't really merit an email address and a form capture every single time. So we've tried to open up as much as possible there. But our head of DevRel, Jamie, who's worked with Adam before, he's got this really great developer success mentality where everything's done in the open. So just like Adam said, like with open and up-to-date documentation, we also create a lot of code examples that are open sourced and publicly accessible. A lot of the work that we do and a lot of the things we put together are just publicly available, even if they're not users. It's all on GitHub. And then we also maintain sort of mini Slack communities or Twitter communities where we're really engaged. We're getting feedback, we're creating content against that, and trying to help other developers who've had similar problems. So I would say this entire openness and willingness to share value up front is something that really resonates well, and it's worked quite well for us. Whereas again, what's not worked well is very similar. It's running those dodgy ads. It's trying to get them on the phone, pushing them into a funnel the moment they sign up, and just adding excessive friction when it's not really necessary.
Right. Yeah, Breann.
Yeah, I'm just gonna piggyback again off Ronak, is like just as much as you can give them for free, whether that's valuable content, whether that's good support site, right, where they can go in and have access to a knowledge base where they can learn about the product or learn how to use it properly, free trials, things like that, and then also giving them an opportunity to comment, right? So everything that we put out there, there's, have a question, ask us now. If you are a customer and you're using a product, or you're in free trial and you're using a product, right? using in-app messaging, in-app opportunities to provide feedback, in-app opportunities to, even if it's just we don't need a big blurb from you of what's going right or wrong on a scale of 1 to 5, yes or no. I think things like that are valuable. And I think when you give your customers or when you give developers an opportunity to simply give their feedback, I think they tend to a lot of times.
Yeah, I found developers have no fear about giving feedback.
Nope.
No, and we appreciate it.
Which actually was something that I've noticed. I was going to ask, like, in a lot of places, in a lot of forums, there's a lot of AMAs, Ask Me Anything sessions. Have any of you tried that on the developer level? Have you tried to do these, and has that worked? I'm just wondering as a idea.
As part of when I was on Y Combinator back in 2015, we launched on Bookface. That's where a lot of developers, technical people hang out.
Right.
And naturally that becomes sort of an AMA when you announce your product or service on that channel, and then people start asking questions and they start tearing you apart. They are completely, they don't care about your feelings or emotions or anything. They will tell you their honest opinions, which is useful feedback because then you can act upon it and change direction if you need to. And that was a very intense day when we launched, because we just spent the entire day answering questions, like hundreds of questions that were coming in. And that was also through live chat as well. We had live chat on the website, and that's really helpful because some developer might be, going through the evaluation process. And we found that the live chat was actually bringing in even big customers, and the velocity of those live chats was far greater than a trial coming through and someone kicking the tires and disappearing.
If you're doing a live chat for developers, though, does that mean you've got a developer sitting there dealing with that instead of coding?
So resourcing live chat is a challenge too, because obviously, you need to have someone technical on the other end of managing the conversation. That proved more challenging as we scaled up and we hit hundreds of chats a day. We could not manage the inbound influx of conversations and the level of detail. And that's where I think a knowledge-based, resources, content to try and eliminate some of that repetitive action is useful. It's also a good place to get feedback directly in. And I remember some of the early deals that we signed in the very early stages came through live chat. Like I said, very, very high velocity. Because when someone's wanting to have a conversation with you, even at a technical level, they're much further into the sales process than somebody just coming in and kicking the tires on a trial. We had crazy. I don't know about you, Ronak, if you can even share, but from a trial perspective, we were getting like hundreds and hundreds of developers every week signing up, and then most of them would kick around the product a bit and then leave, and then you would never see them again, and they probably never engage with your emails either because they don't check their inboxes. They're busy writing code, they're doing stuff, they're busy people.
That's true, and I think we noticed this. So just for context, back we also used to have we used to push the trial pretty heavily, which gave you almost enterprise features. But I think what we've done since then is just focus a lot more on the free plan. So most of the effort goes either in the free plan or the enterprise plan, with the paid tiers just being more or less self-service. And we've really slashed that onboarding down to a welcome email and a follow-up email a week later, which is just, hey, by the way, here's the docs, here's the examples, no sales talk, no conversion talk, none of that. And I don't know, you've still got the people who try out the trial and then, never see them again. But hopefully it's much lesser than it used to be. I need to check the numbers from the last iteration.
Breann, did you ever try that, an AMA for developers? Or the live chat, as Adam put it?
Yeah, I haven't had too much experience with that. We've done it on a smaller scale with a customer base, roundtable type things where we invite customers and let them it's open door policy type, get it all out kind of thing. We tried it at a controlled environment, which I think actually had a lot of benefit too, because I'm assuming that if 15 customers show up and 5 of them have the same concern, that you could assume that this is going to be a big concern for everyone, right? So we were able to address it, but also have it in that we're not overwhelmed with thousands of responses that we can't manage, kind of things. So yeah.
That's Adam's live chat thing, I think is probably an impressive feat, but you probably had to scale a bunch of people to deal with that. And
we ended up turning it off because we couldn't scale it.
You know,
Yeah,
but
was the answer.
but your
we
CEO
were
is probably sitting there going, but dude, we're getting all the sales. Like, you know, people are coming,
Correct.
people are interacting, you know. Like, this is the typical problem, you know, development wants the code and everybody else wants to make money. Like, you know, you,
I
as a
mean,
business,
turning off
this
the
is
direct
always the
access,
problem.
you know, yeah, exactly. Turning off the direct access and conversation to the market is a
Right.
challenge. But for my previous company, it was like noise. There was so much coming in, and this is something as well about free plans too, that developers can have high expectations even when they're getting something for free.
Right.
And it's crazy to try and balance those expectations against reality of building a company and serving developers when
Right.
you have like paying customers, which naturally you would want to prioritize. So it's a constant balancing act of, you know, doing what's right for the community versus doing what's right, you know, for the company. So that's a really difficult challenge to solve for.
So, and about 2 weeks ago, I presented at a conference online, and I was presenting on the admin side, not the developer side. And then what they did at the end of the day was they basically just had an open forum for people to ask questions in general across the board. You know, didn't matter what you were trying to do. And it was really interesting because, like you were saying, the developers are asking very specific, detailed questions because they've run into a problem, or the API doesn't do what it was supposed to do, or the call's not working. And, you know, but the ability was there for everybody to share that and be there. In the many years ago when we were at, you know, conferences, the last day of the conference, we used to have Ask the Developer sessions. All the key developers would be on stage and anybody can ask whatever they want. And the most famous answer always is, you know, we'll have to get back to you about that. You know, or the it's working as designed, but it may not be working the way you want it to be designed. You know, so when you get feedback from the APIs out there, because now, you know, we're talking about marketing and getting people out there. What do you do when you get the feedback from the APIs about things maybe that aren't there yet? Or, you know, how do you decide what that priority is going to be sometimes when especially if a bigger customer, let's say, comes to you and asks you for something?
For me, it would depend upon the specific type of feedback. If it was something around like the structure of the API itself, I would fall back on like, what is this, you know, what is the schema built around? Like if you're on like JSON schema or GraphQL, whatever it is, I would kind of point there as like, this is the standard that we build to, versus like if it's like product or feature sort of specific, that would probably be a question for the product managers, VP of products, etc. That they sort of run the roadmap, and we would pass that along, and they would, you know, along with all the other channels that they collect information through, they would filter that and prioritize that, and then you can go back to the prospect, to the customer, with some, hopefully some degree of answer that would satisfy their query beyond just yeah, we don't know.
Breann, you're probably going to tell me also it's probably a roadmap answer for some of that.
Yeah, I think it's a lot of times it's a roadmap because it could be something that's in the pipeline. We just haven't actually addressed it yet because we don't want to talk about it yet because it's not quite there. I've been lucky where I've always worked in most companies I've worked, we've had a pretty strong support team. The business is really, you know, I guess invested in a support staff. And so a lot of times what they'll do is they'll actually gather a lot of this information from customers or from people who are using the free trial even. And then they pass it on and they have sessions with the product management team. The product management team will look at it from a value perspective of, is this worth adding to the roadmap? Is this worth allocating resources from an engineering perspective, right, to build this out? I tend to be a little bit more outside of that process, although I care about the feedback and like what is going on. I care more about like what we're actually marketing and what we actually are trying to get out to customers. So I think that's another one of those gray lines of customer success, support, and then product management.
Right. Ronak, you have anything you want to add?
I think it would definitely sit with product as a decision, but it really depends on where that feedback's been coming from and how much, right? So for context, we have a public feature request board for the community, but then there's also whatever comes in on live chat or via Slack, or even from colleagues within the team who are working with something and saying it just makes sense to build further upon this to have it as a more complete feature. So kind of depending on where these things come in from and what the volume of each request is, they'll eventually go into the product planning process and the roadmap. but we'll also have a bit of wiggle room here to see, okay, these are kind of the requests, but at the same time, features like X, Y, or Z, they just make sense to have for a product like ours. So maybe we should prioritize these over others to have a more sort of complete feature set. So it really depends. Classic marketing answer, I know, but it depends.
Yeah, that's fine. As they always say, someone's got a list somewhere, right?
Yeah.
So I know time-wise, we're probably getting close to our time. So I'm going to ask each of you to either give a recommendation for a blog, a site, a book, or something that people should, follow or get into to learn more, or something to give people something to do, because a lot of people are still at home and have some time still, and people want to get into something new, and maybe just give them some hope that there is a way to market this stuff somehow. So Ronak, I'll let you start, because I know you had a bunch of stuff when we were talking last time.
Yeah, I mean, I understand that it's kind of hard to find content like this very often. So I do maintain a GitHub repository that's just like a list of developer marketing resources. It's called Awesome Developer Marketing. But if I had to pick one from there, I've been recently reading SendGrid's State of Developer and Marketing Relations. It's a little study they did from 2019, which really goes into the detail about how developers expect certain things and how companies and marketers can sort of tweak their relationship with developers when they're trying to sell a product. So I'd recommend that if you can find it.
Okay, thanks. Breann?
I just say get where the developers are. I would say find out maybe even from like your own customers what they're going to. I don't have a specific law. I mean, I look at Reddit a lot, and I'm looking at G2 crowd recommendations. That's where I spend a lot of my time, to be honest. I'm always just, as a marketer first, I think I really focus on things like learning how to be a better writer, learning how to condense, technical information down. So reading things about technical writing is where I spend a lot of my time, how to condense information into layman's terms. I like Ann Handley's Everybody Writes. It's a very, very simple marketing book, but it does help you just kind of get past the fear of writing. And even if it's maybe more technical than you are maybe used to, I would say that's going back to my statement of be where the developers are. Look at the blogs that they look at the channels that they're looking at, and just try to learn from them.
All right, thanks. Adam?
I'll make mine short and sweet. There's a lot of overlap with like developer marketing, developer go-to-market, and APIs with product-led growth. So I would just recommend checking out productled.com. There's a whole bunch of assets and resources that they have available, and books that people have written in the community, which is super valuable and super relevant for applying to developers and APIs.
That'd be great. From myself, I'm not a huge developer, although in the past I've done some. I basically would kind of repeat what I think most of you said earlier, was really, if you're a marketer and you're trying to get into this space and you're not from the technical side, play with it. Get out there and find a product you recognize, a product you know how to use maybe, or something you want to do more with, and just try and figure out what to do with it. You need to get your head around this space. There's a lot of terms, lots of different things. You're not going to become a core developer, but you need to get your head around it. And the only way to do it really is to get embedded in some of it. So I would definitely tell people, get out and try it, play with it. I'm sure you've got friends somewhere that can help you. Just do some simple, hello world type things. I think that's probably about our time for today. I want to thank everybody who came. Thank Ronak and Breann and Adam for being on the panel. And hopefully, if you all get to be to some of the other sessions, you enjoy them just as much as we've enjoyed doing this session. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Welcome back to DevMarcon, the first developer marketing summit from the Product Marketing Alliance. I hope you're enjoying the content so far. I want to thank you all for joining us and send out an extra special thank you to to all our sponsors, partners, and participants who together have made this event possible. Their sessions are bursting with insights to help you level up. But remember, the learning doesn't stop here. If you haven't already, you can become a PMA member and benefit from unlimited access to all today's content, along with a whole host of other exclusive content and tools. Or simply upgrade to an Access All Areas pass to catch up with all session recordings on demand. And remember, have your questions at the ready. Simply post them in the comments section and get awesome advice from our experts. We've got another awesome session lined up for you now, so sit back, relax, and enjoy the talk.
Good morning, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the session. This is the Marketer's Guide to Building a Developer Program. My name is Dinesh Chandrasekhar. I run product marketing for the data and motion product line at Cloudera. A little bit about me. I've worn many different hats over the years. As a developer, as an architect, I myself have been a developer evangelist at a couple of companies. And so today as a product marketer, I have a very unique perspective of what it takes to build a developer program at various companies. So I'm here to share my insights, my own experiences with you today. Let's first define the phrase developer marketing. Let's call that out as a paradox because there is no such thing as marketing to a developer. Developers are the best when it comes to sniffing out marketing messages, and they'll clearly call it out. So you have to have a clear strategy, a different strategy than your traditional marketing means in order to connect with your developer community. So how does it work if you are to enable, empower, and embrace developers? Because this is very important to them. The fundamental philosophy is that never market to them, right? So that's there. But how do you even connect with a breed of personas that detest marketing language? How do you embrace them and empower them when they are trying to learn, try and adopt your product, but at the same time, you're not supposed to use any kind of flowery marketing language? They are excited about new tech. They love new technology. But to them, time is currency, which means they need whatever they need right then and there. They cannot go through sign-up processes. They cannot go through long processes of engaging with sales teams and so forth. If they want an API, they need it yesterday. And the important thing that I also want to emphasize is that they love being part of a larger community. And this is where they get to share best practices, code samples, and so forth. So for you to be successful with engaging with developers, you need to give them that platform, that sense of community in order to build the trust with them. Developers, developers, developers. We have heard this time and again. Classic Steve Ballmer at work like more than a couple of decades ago. But the reality holds true even today, right? 27 million developers across the world. And the amount of products that we are talking about is like over $40 billion of worth of products that are being consumed or influenced or purchased by developers. And we're looking at least a growth of like over trillion APIs by 2035. So this is truly a massive opportunity, market opportunity for us to like tap into as marketers. But at the same time, we have to acknowledge that the product adoption starts with them, the buyer's journey starts with them. They tend to use our products, they acknowledge that they like it, and then they become the champions, they evangelize it, they talk about it within their companies and make it work for us. So in order to be successful with a bottom-up approach, you need to be able to make sure that you are giving them enough for you to for them to like trust in you, for them to try out the products, for them to become those champions. So in order to do so, you need a developer program. Let's discuss what a developer program is and understand what it takes to build one in the subsequent sections. What is a developer program and why do you need one? So if we are to agree that nothing that is considered traditional marketing works for developers, how else are we supposed to connect with them? How else are we supposed to embrace them and empower them? You need a specialist team. You need a team which we will refer to as the DevRel team or the developer relations team in the subsequent section. But that team and the resources that you offer to this development community are super critical in order to engage with the developers. There needs to be a constant care in building and nurturing and enriching this community, this developer community, in order for you to gain their trust. And it is important as well to build and preserve this trust with an ongoing focus with whatever you do in however you communicate and engage with these developers. So this is what a developer program offers, the construct, the framework within which these specialist teams and the resources can work within. A developer experience is also another term that you would have heard when you're looking for an alternative for developer program. A developer experience is a more richer, broader way to like define what a developer program is, because it does include the people, the tools that they use in order to communicate and engage or connect with the developers, the processes that you adopt. Again, remember, developers don't like elaborate processes, but processes are critical in order to be successful for you to measure the success of a developer program. The content that you offer to the developers, whether it be rich technical content or documentation or API docs or whatever you deliver to them, that needs to also resonate very well as a part of this experience. And the events, the platform that you offer, the community with which they can exchange various best practices and thoughts and inputs and have those discussions in an open forum. All that contribute or factor into this thing that we term as developer experience. This is what the developer receives as a factor of love when they work with you as a company, when they work with your products in order to gain the mutual trust that we spoke about. So when would you need a developer program? What are the types of offerings that you would typically have that warrant a developer program? Because remember, not all products require a developer program. So let's kind of distinguish and identify which ones need so. First off, a PaaS type offering like Salesforce.com. They've been phenomenal at offering a platform where other companies, other developers can build their own applications on top of that. So exposing that kind of a platform makes it possible. Or a marketplace offering like the App Store from Apple, which allows you as a developer to build applications that then can serve up for other customers as well. So providing that kind of a platform as well is a great way to like nurture a developer program. The second one is APIs, right? So if you are a product offering that has APIs and you want developers to consume, classic, you need a developer program, period. Developer tools, which is again something like a Microsoft Visual Studio, for example, which offers the IDE to developers so that they can build all different types of applications using a variety of programming languages. So this, in a sense, is what we term as a classic example of where you would need a developer program. Open source products. I deal with this day in and day out over the last 4 years. I talk to open source communities. I engage with them. I offer various ways, content, mechanisms, events, you name it, the whole developer program that is needed to like engage with this community. So, open source means developers, period. And if your product's primary end users are developers, meaning your developers are instrumental in building programs that enable other end users within the platform as well. So that could be another way how you can think of as a need for a developer program for your set of products. So in a sense, these are the types of products, not necessarily the finite list, but broad strokes of when you can think of you wanting a developer program. Where does one start to build a developer program? This question came to me a few years ago. I'll give you a little anecdote, and then you can kind of start pondering that for yourself. Why is this a marketer's guide to begin with, right? So why not an engineer's guide or somebody else's guide? A marketer's guide primarily because a marketer is in kind of like in the nexus of things that are happening within the company, particularly a product marketer like me. I engage with engineering, product management, sales leadership, and so many different teams cross-functionally that I'm right in the crux of all this action happening, and I'm kind of the liaison between all these different teams. And I've been doing this over the last several companies that I've been working with. One such company was CA Technologies. So it was going back like 6-7 years ago when I was tasked with like launching a mobile backend as a service product, which was primarily an SDK. I realized that CA did not have a developer-facing front end, no developer portal per se, to connect or communicate with developers. They've never done that because they never had a developer product until that point. So I ended up launching developer.ca.com for the first time. And the experience that I learned from that in implementing that developer program, in building this developer portal, is what I'm sharing with you today. So what is the process to kick off a developer program? It's kind of like almost best practices that I learned when I built that developer program at CA, I'm sharing with you. First order of business, executive buy-in. First and foremost, you need to do this because a developer program is not done overnight. It is not built within like 3 months and you're going to like see the fruits of your labor right then and there. It takes time to build, meaning there is a lot of engagement. You need time to build that community from ground up and so forth. So which means 12 to 18 months is what you're looking at in terms of seeing actual results from your developer program. So you need to have executive buy-in in order to stay focused on your program and have that backing behind you. Second thing, Tiger Team. Get all the stakeholders lined up for you. This would be across product management, engineering, sales, and so forth. Make sure everybody understands what you're doing as a developer program and why we are doing it. Nobody would understand it if you are starting off with a company like that, where I was, where they've never done or had a developer program before. So if you are in one such company, if you're starting afresh, you need to educate everyone first. You need to make sure that you tell them what a developer program is. I did this by hiring a third-party agency and coaching all of us in one single room, right? So get all the stakeholders, the Tiger Team in one room and have this third-party agency train us on what a developer program is, set goals, understand what metrics we should be measuring and monitoring. Success metrics. It's not easy. When it comes to developer programs, I'll guarantee you you're going to have multiple opinions from multiple people on what we should be measuring. But the reality is that you should stay focused on what is practical and what you should be measuring for a developer program. I'll go into a little bit more details on what those metrics look like in a couple of slides. Project plan. Have a project plan clearly defined so that you have short-term timelines of when certain deliverables will be delivered, as well as long-term of when certain things might happen. This is very critical for all the stakeholders, again, to be in sync with how the developer program is progressing. Have weekly syncs with all of them. Keep them updated on status and progress as well. The developer portal is kind of like one of those immediate gratification things, right? So instant gratification, as they say, it won't be instant. You need time to build it. You need time to build content and add content and all that too. But this is one of the first things that you will see internally as well as externally as the face of the developer program. This will be the facade, through which the developers interface with your company, with your products, as well as you kind of offering various types of content and engagements to the developers through this. So every company has one. Again, companies that have developer products will have a developer portal through which they offer API docs, technical documentation, and so forth. And the way to do that, again, from an engagement standpoint, is also having a DevRel team. So your first hire might be a developer advocate or a developer evangelist, and you want to make sure that that person starts off on the right foot using the portal as a mechanism, but also not just the portal, but through social media and through other such channels, a multi-channel approach into engaging with the developers and the development community. while you may start off with just one evangelist and one advocate, you will grow. You will see the need for having a community manager, a DevRel director, a team of DevRel evangelists, and so forth. So you will have more people on the team as you start seeing the program expand and the needs for more content arise. Do's and don'ts of a developer program. Let's start about that. First off, the do's. Facilitate interactions between the various teams, DevRel, engineering, PM, marketing, and others. You primarily use this developer program as a way to interact and interface with all these cross-functional teams. That's internal. Externally, you're allowing the developers to easily access resources they're looking for. Again, quick is the word, keyword here. Make sure that they can access these resources instantly and immediately, not through having to jump through hoops and various processes. Encourage the community to share best practices, code, samples, conversations, right? And these need not be, again, within just through a particular forum, but they can be doing it through Slack, they can be doing it on Stack Overflow, various different, channels. But the idea is to encourage them. And then you can also offer your own ways of these types of interfacing, meetups, hackathons, Slack channels, more developer events, and so forth as well. The don'ts are primarily don't use marketing lingo. Developers can sniff that out very easily. Don't also expect leads from engagement, sales revenues from all this. It'll all happen. Eventually it'll happen, but don't expect those right away. And also don't expect or set up a program where you can track developers automatically going into MQLs and all that. That won't work either. You need to make sure that you have a way to correlate the developer engagements with this. For example, APIs. If you set up an API and if you have consumption happening based on a particular engagement that you did, let's say a developer talk was done, and then following that, suddenly there's a surge of your API's consumption, that automatically is the correlation that you can link it to. Don't send too many emails as well for lead nurturing, which is also a big turnoff for developers. It's okay to send emails, but the emails should be more like newsletter types that include content, that include technical content that matters to them, that include product updates, that ask them for input and things which make more sense for the developers in their language rather than sending marketing language. And also don't invite developers for marketing events. They don't like it. Measuring success of your developer program. So this is what it'll boil down to, right? So product metrics are primarily about number of calls being made to your API, as I just explained, or number of downloads of your trial or your SDK as well. That's also a good measure. But more importantly or interestingly is the number of product feedback inputs that you get from the community. See, this is truly telling of your engagement skills within the community. The more you engage with the community, the more trust you build, they're going to give you more inputs about your product of what works and what doesn't work, how it could be better, and so forth. The second thing is community level metrics. Again, as marketers, we all tend to understand communities to a fair degree, right? So we can measure number of community members, the monthly growth, and all that, pretty standard. You can also look at social media metrics, likes, follows, and all that kind of stuff. But if you are looking at, let's say, having a separate account, a social media account for your dev channel, for your dev program, then that would be different because now you are tracking specifically for that particular channel, the engagements that occur with that and all that. So you might probably even need a specialized social media manager for your own DevRel team as well, which could be the case. But again, it depends on your company and your corporate strategy and so forth. You may choose to have the same channel for one and the both, but it's important to track the engagement from those levels as well. Last but not least, the experience metrics are very critical for us, right? Experience metrics are where you understand the number of users and signups to the site across multi-channels. That's very simple, right? So maybe that's measurable. But what is most important and interesting and even more harder to measure is the developer satisfaction scores. So the more you engage with them, how much they trust in you, how much they feel happy with the whole overall developer experience that you offer as a company and as a product is where it truly kicks in, right? So that's where you start realizing that the developers and the community actually love your product, actually love your company, actually love the way you present it to them, actually love the way you engage with them. Last but not least, gamification metrics. These are also fantastic ways to engage your developer community. Microsoft was master at this years ago when they created the MVP program, having various different types of honors and badges and things like that. And so many companies have adopted different types of models going about this as well. And I would encourage you to think about that, because that's how you grow champions beyond your company. It's okay that you can hire a few people that can speak for you about your product and so forth. But that's like paid engagements, or your own employees talking about it. But unwarranted, unsolicited, great championing on their own is something that you will not be able to get unless and until you are doing a great job at this developer engagement with this developer program. And that's what happens when truly great, awesome products are delivered to developers the right way. Developers become the champions for you. They start talking about it within their own companies. Look at how awesome this product is. We should all adopt this. So that's where the whole land and expand opportunities come in play, where one set of developers love it within a large company, they start talking about it to the larger developer community within that company, and your product automatically gets adopted within that company. That's how you grow. So I'll leave you with this last thought. The amount of time that it takes a developer program to be successful from baseline to growth is measured in years, not months or quarters. I cannot emphasize this more, right? It's so important to talk about this right now, because as you start embarking on this journey to building a developer program within your company, you will realize that there are many stakeholders that are going to ask you, hey, what are you guys doing? I know you have your DevRel team, they're talking with developers and all that. Where do I see any metrics or measurable, quantifiable metrics that say that you guys are doing a good job? And that's where this particular statement should be taken with a lot of, more than a pinch of salt, I would say, because you need to understand that it doesn't happen overnight. It takes work. Time is a currency for developers, as well as it's an investment for us as well. You need to invest the time in your developer community. You need to nurture them. You need to grow them, build that trust. That's most important. You have to come across as credible. You have to win their trust. And that's when they become the champions. Then you start seeing the fruits of labor come in play. Then you start seeing your pipeline automatically grow. Then you start seeing more inbound conversations coming in through saying, we would like to have your company come in and do XYZ deal or opportunity or a conversation or engagement or even an RFP and things like that with you automatically. That's what happens. So good luck to you in building your developer program. I want to make sure that you walk away with these key insights that I've gathered over my years of experience, and I hope you found that useful. Thank you so much for joining my session today. I hope you found it valuable. Look forward to meeting you in person one of these days.
Ready to take your product marketing skills to the next level? Want to develop your expertise, enhance your career prospects? Well, join over 3,000 product marketers who are already certified. Product Marketing Core is PMA's official certification program covering the fundamentals of product marketing. Spanning 11 modules and 68 chapters, the course includes over 10 hours of content, drilling down into key areas like research, pricing, OKRs, and much, much more. We've created not one, not two, but 3 versions of the course to ensure there's an option to suit your requirements. First up, let's check out our on-demand option. We've collaborated with positioning expert April Dunford to make this a course you won't want to miss out on. Senior level product marketers from the likes of Salesforce, HubSpot, Google, and Facebook have vetted, tested, and approved the syllabus so you can be sure you're in good hands. Plus, with tuition from experts plying their trade at globally recognized brands such as Adobe, IBM, and LinkedIn, you'll be hard pressed to find a course this comprehensive or this thorough anywhere else. If you're looking for a more interactive experience, enroll in our live and online course, step into the virtual classroom and join a PMA expert in residence who'll guide you through the syllabus and be on hand to answer any questions that you may have. Get certified in 4 weeks with our part-time course, or do it all in 1 day with our 1-day option. The choice is yours. Whichever you go for, Product Marketing Core ticks all the boxes. Whether you're new to the industry or a seasoned product marketer, B2B or B2C, physical or SaaS. By the time you wrap up the final exam, you'll have the knowledge and tools you need to effectively and successfully attract and retain more customers. You'll also have a whole host of exclusive templates in your back pocket, as well as access to live weekly workshops and optional coursework to consolidate your know-how. And finally, with Product Marketing Core Teams, you can level up your team's product marketing efforts and get everyone within your function certified through our industry-leading, fully comprehensive course. In the words of now certified PMMs, this course is invaluable and everything a product marketer needs. So head to productmarketingalliance.com to secure your spot and get certified.
Hello, wherever you are joining us from today, I want to say a huge welcome to our global community. We hope you're enjoying the Developer Marketing Summit. I also want to send out an extra special thank you to all our sponsors, partners, and speakers who together have made this event possible. I hope you are finding today's sessions insightful, and I want to remind you that the learnings don't stop here. If you haven't already, you can become a PMA member or upgrade to an Access All Areas Pass to benefit from unlimited access to all today's content. What's more, you can continue the conversation in the PMA's Slack community. If you aren't already a member, then hop on over and join the discussions today. And remember, this is your chance to get involved. Please share your feedback and questions in the comments section for our speakers to answer. It really is that simple. Let's resume the sessions.
Welcome to the Developer Marketing Summit. My name is Becky Trevino. I am glad to welcome you to how to go from PMM to developer marketing. Joining me today is Ali Mahmoud. I'll do a quick intro to myself first. I lead product marketing and operations at So Software. I have been in product marketing for over 10 years, moving the ranks up from senior PMM to leading the product marketing function. And throughout my career, I've really targeted in and spoken to just that technical audience. In previous lives, I've actually gone after the developer audience as we were trying to build up the cloud at my former company. And I've also owned our Rackspace community where we were aiming to build a community that just spoke in cloud and spoke about all the latest technologies in that. Ali, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, thanks, Becky. Hi, everyone. Ali Mahmoud here. I'm VP Product Management at Augmentt. And like Becky, I've been at many different companies, many different roles. I would say there's been no consistent thread throughout my career. I've probably worked across 7 different industries, many different types of personas. I'm a former developer myself. I started my career in software, very quickly graduated into product management. And over the past 13 years, I've been doing product management, product marketing roles. And for me, it's all about, building great product, communicating that great product to the target market that you're trying to reach, and really understanding them regardless of the industry you're in. And I would say software developers are near and dear to my heart. I still consider myself one, even though I haven't touched code in probably 12 years. But yeah, I'm looking forward to this.
Well, sounds great. One fun part audience is Ali and I used to work together. So you get a little bit of the Ali Beckyism as you come through this. And one of the big reasons I invited Ali was just to get that perspective from somebody who had been a developer before and who had transitioned into other roles And so that we kind of challenge each other in our thinking, because I really come at it from a product marketing and a bit of a product perspective. So first off, one of the big ones we asked as part of this talk was, well, how does a product marketer break into developer marketing? And that can actually be tough, because a lot of times the rank of developer marketing comes in from somebody who's been a solution consultant, someone like Allie, for example, that's been an engineer who might be looking for another type of career. So oftentimes, if you had a background that just read senior product marketing manager, you might not be top on the list for someone that may be under consideration. So with that, I thought about this notion of, well, what would someone do to just break that bias and say, yes, I could do this? And I leaned into the thought about, it's important to just know your persona and use those research aspects that are strong within a PMM to just, really convince someone of, hey, I actually know a lot about this. And with that, I wanted to dive in with you, Allie, on, what would be that number one tip of somebody that you'd say going into a persona piece that you'd say, like, make sure the PMM knows this if they're thinking about going into developer marketing?
Yeah, and I would say this is kind of universal, that the people who make the best product managers and the best product marketers are the ones who are curious about their customer. And it's not any ground foundational perfect knowledge that you have. It's about keeping your ears open, talking to sales, talking to the solution architects, talking to developers at your own company, and really just being willing to learn. And I think that anybody can become an expert in any persona. And just by talking to them, understanding their problems, where do they fit within their company's hierarchy, who's part of the buying and decision-making processes, anybody can learn that process. That part is not rocket science, and you don't need to be a coder yourself to understand the people who write all of the code.
I think a big one also is to just break our assumptions. Just how I said, look, that the persona doesn't need to be, hey, if you're not a former SC or developer, you can't do this job. We as product marketers need to not have that stereotypical nerd persona and think, we talked about in our precursor to this call, like, you can't make Star Wars your marketing strategy. So I think that's going to be a big one, is that you understand really closely and use those persona framework chops and research to really understand, okay, your company is hiring you for a reason. Most marketing organizations want to become a destination for their buyers, for content, for knowledge. And there's a specific person you're targeting, a specific segment of the market. We often use this blanket persona terms, but there's specifically a segment. There's specifically, are you looking at front-end developers, back-end, full stack? Do they have specific interests? Are they focusing on databases? Do they have some other type of interest that comes in? And you really need to know that specific pain point that your company has and what they solve and what your solutions are aimed to. And then who would be interested in that? Who actually has a pain point around that and how they go about buying the solution? Because then that actually helps you understand, well, what content would I build for them? What are their pain points? How do I help? How do I be useful for that person as they're trying to do research around this area? Because developers, like anyone else who's trying to make a big purchase, they have to do that research first. And oftentimes they're the most analytical of the audiences. They want to hold off on talking to that salesperson for as long as they can. And they want to hear from other developers like them who had experience with that technology before they try anything else. And also it's a big one about try before you buy. And that's where you need to really understand what are those pieces of research that they would need that would also come across as credible, and potentially how you use research sites with your product, how you actually can understand where they would look and what would be aspects like communities, for example, like Stack Overflow, is that the right community where your folks hang out, and where would they find information and what are they talking about as they're researching there?
Yeah, and I'll just echo everything Becky said. There is no stereotypical programmer. There's not even a stereotypical programming role. I've worked with dozens of different development teams, and you would think that, early in my career, I recall most of the developers I worked with being gamers or, having some other common interest. Nowadays, like so many different teams I work with know more about sports than I do, or are jocks, or any walk of life. So we can't assume that they're any one type of person in their personal life, but what they do share is this common role. And so I would say really understanding that role is important. Are they the actual one writing the code, or are they architecting the whole system? Are they the day-to-day operations people on the DevOps and infrastructure management side? Are they pure QA and just testing the product? understanding that role is going to be critical to reaching them with the right message. And I would share a common trait that is they all share would be that they're analytical, fact-based. So a little bit of emotion, a little bit of creativity always goes a long way in marketing. But I would say make sure that the meat of the marketing campaign and the content you're creating is actually hitting the key pain points in their job, the key values that you bring to the table. And don't forget that they love shiny new technology, and every developer wants to go out there and be part of AI or big data or whatever new programming language is the hottest trend. So I would say tying it into their interest, but also meeting that kind of analytical, fact-based message that's going to resonate with them would be very important.
Just what triggered the thought for me, Ali, was this idea of knowing the pain points, because that's where those good frameworks around the buyer's journey, we sometimes don't want to do the diligence of doing those, of like that, from that top of the funnel, bottom, what's the first thing they do, what's the bottom that they do, and really understanding that really sets you up for success. Because it could take somebody who doesn't know anything to go from knows nothing to becoming an expert if you understand every step of that, because everybody goes through this big process, and really taking the time to build the frameworks of who are the different personas, what is special about them, what's unique, what's their pain point, and then taking that pain across the entire buyer's journey will really be helpful for you at making sure that you have the right content at each stage. That's, again, useful, because these are no different than any other humans that are out there trying to solve a problem. They just approach it from a different perspective, and don't let your fact that you may get intimidated because you may or may not come with that knowledge, or you may or not come from that community, take you away from having those basic sets of knowledge and frameworks that can help you to get to that right solution.
Yeah, I think that the buyer's journey always matters. At what stage, and as much as we want to focus on the RFP process or something at the very end that makes you the decision, there could be someone who's just in learning mode and just keeping up on the latest trends, and you're just doing an awareness style campaign. They could be further down the buying journey and they're trying to shortlist someone, so you need more of the checklist type content. But I would say it's super important to understand what are the stages of the journey at a whole, but then pepper that kind of content throughout so that you are able to educate them, whether they're just browsing one of their favorite dev websites like Stack Overflow, or if they're further down the process and now they, like everybody on the planet, have a boss and they have to justify some new spend for something they want. And if you can solve that problem for them of showing the ROI and justifying that, their competing company or some adjacent company in their same industry did this and doubled efficiency, that's the kind of stuff that they need, that they won't necessarily be as strong at on the business case side. And if you can provide that content, that's massive for helping them justify even after they've fallen in love with your product and all of your marketing content.
Yep. If that goes to our number two. So number one was, as you're making this transition, you're thinking about it, know your persona, really use that to sell it, to get yourself break into developer marketing if it's not something. But really the second point for our talk was really know your limits, challenge your own assumptions. So if you're technical, leverage the crap out of it. But if you're not, lean in heavily into others. So maybe start, Ali, with your perspective. You've been technical in some aspects. How have you been able to leverage that knowledge you've had as a former developer to really get to know your personas a little bit better?
Yeah, I would say that, even though I have technical ability, I never assume that I know exactly who my person is and exactly what their problems are. So keeping that open mind. And I think that if you are technical, then get to know your product, be the evangelist for your product. And if you can rely, one of the hardest things for the average PMM to do is to take an idea and have it see the light of day in a marketing campaign or a public video on the corporate website. And if you can have the relationship with marketing, and then you can do quick turnarounds to record your own demos, write your own little blogs and documentation and other articles like that, the velocity that you'll be able to hit the market with and impact marketing campaigns is going to be massive. So if you're technical, 100% leverage yourself. And then of course, pair up with other people internally, but don't wait until someone else comes along to create all that great educational content on your company. Often you have to be the agent of change to get the ball rolling with that kind of stuff. Then when marketing sees the impact of it, that's when you get the resources and the budget to support you do more of it.
I love that, because the biggest mistake we can often make when we are technical is to assume that I am the persona. No one is ever the persona. The persona isn't the persona. The personas are an amalgamation of just various personas that come into it. So you always have to challenge your assumptions there, that you're not just making, oh, well, if this is the way I think, this is the way my customer's going to think. No, you really have to test that. And that comes down to my 3 rules of product marketing, which I'm going to transfer over to developer marketing too. It's know your product, know your customer, and know your market. Those things are fundamental. And there's so often that people, particularly product marketers, leave off the know your product. They're going to leave that to the PM, and then the solution consultant. Is you should be able to demo and talk about that product like no one else. I think one of my proudest moments, we work together at the company I'm at now, and was when I can sit there and go to the IT asset management review council and talk about that, because I never knew anything about IT asset management before being in the role. And you have to be able to sit there and speak up and go to the technical people. People really know that in the audience, and say, I'm credible enough to be able to do that. I've learned enough about this product, this industry, the pain points, and the customers to be able to do that. I have credibility. I had this proud moment where somebody actually told me, and they're like, you're great in this space. And I sent it over to our forward team. I was like, yes, I won. I understand this. I understand the IT manager, where it comes in. And I felt proud, because you need to be able to know that, where if somebody could be like, yeah, that person, they're not just the vendor, they actually feel the pain I'm going through. So that's really, really important. And I, that's an example of something I knew nothing about the persona before walking into a role. And 2+ years later, the persona thinks I actually have something of value to share. So you can do it. I think I did it in an audience like this one. It's possible. You just have to listen in, to lean in, as we were talking about, to people, the experts within your company that know it. Listen into the sales call. Create a objective, a goal for yourself to be the person that can demo your product better than anybody else. Watch the people who really do it. Be able to answer the tough questions. Listen to the sales calls. And don't feel apprehensive about the product. And then if you can marry that product, customer, and market, you can come across as somebody really credible in any space.
Yeah, and you might feel like a fraud at first, but fake it till you make it. Trust us.
There you go. Yeah, go in on that.
Yeah, it's not an easy process, and I would say that the technical person who currently isn't doing the writing and the videos, etc., probably doesn't have a ton of experience there. Trust us, nobody on the other end is expecting perfection, right? The developers want to hear from real people, and you're a real person who has some real passion about your own product. Just get it out there, get some feedback, adjust and iterate going forward. And the production value and other things like that, those will increase over time. But pretty much every YouTube influencer or anybody else that is successful today is just someone who is passionate about something and was sharing that passion. They found like-minded people to follow along, and then all the production value and the millions of followers and dollars followed later. So don't worry too much.
I think that was the other point that came in, that we talked about, just don't be gimmicky. Don't try to get there too fast and try to growth hack anything, and that gets you in a bad spot and makes you lose credibility, where the next time you try to go into built-in communities, whether that's on Reddit or any other place, nobody wants to interact with you because you've kind of lost that credibility really quickly. Be wise about the way you're posting, listen, really learn, and really absorb and be that sponge of knowledge from people within your company, within people within the industry, oftentimes competitors. I'm somebody that follows all of my competitors, follow all substitutes of what comes in, and I just regularly learn from that knowledge. I like to soak it all in of where it came in. Just this morning, somebody's like, where do you find the time to do this? I'm like, I like doing it. That's why I have the time doing it, of where it comes in. The next one we kind of wanted to lean in, and we're already kind of heading there, is this idea about being useful. That was number 3 on our list of how to make this conversion, how to be successful, is we wrote about being direct and showing tangible value. So Al, is there any experience you've had where you've been able to show that tangible value?
Yeah, definitely. I think, and we said, if you're an expert, create all this great content and just get started. But even if you're not, don't worry. There's so many other people in your company that want to help. They can spare the hour to help you do a webinar, write a blog piece, etc. So don't feel like you have to be the expert and do all of the work yourself. I find that the best PMs, the best product people, are generally people who are able to identify who all the contributors are and then pull them together kind of as this cross-functional center of excellence within the company. And that's what I do at every role, is try to seek out all the smartest and brightest people and just repeat what they say. And it's worked for me so far, so give it a try. But I would say when it comes to being useful, the goal here is, like Becky said, don't be gimmicky, don't write the fluffy blog piece and just regurgitate everything that everybody else is saying. Some of my favorite campaigns, and I was working with Becky on some of these, are do the work, right? So when it came to some of the cloud infrastructure, cloud technology content that we were trying to create, it didn't take me mountains of effort, but it took me a couple weeks to do some deep research into cloud costing, understand the options that were available, all the calculators that were available. And guess what? You doing 2 weeks of heavy lifting that you write into a 5-minute piece or a video or something short, you just save somebody, 40, 80 hours of homework that they would have had to do anyways to come to the same conclusion as you. You don't want to impart too much bias into the content, otherwise you lose trust. But I would say go ahead and say, hey, here's the problem I see, right? You have 10 different choices. Those choices break into these 3 buckets, and give it a shot. And you can kind of guide people towards your product and say, hey, we solve problem A and we don't solve problems B and C. And if you can be honest about what you're good at, what you're not good at, your product, your company, etc., people will trust the recommendations when you recommend yourself. So I would say that's, if you're doing the work, if you're providing useful content, if you're not being, clearly sales and marketing-y and super biased, people will listen to what you have to say.
Big one is really also checking out the content that's available to somebody who are going to be doing the research. There's oftentimes you go in and there's just a dearth of information, and also just knowing the different channels. So many people just want to see a video now instead of reading a 20-page paper. And so where can it be short? And then in a space where if somebody wants to learn more, they click more, but you're really going in and providing that in a space that may just be better. There's definitely opportunities, but how can you optimize some of those channels to have that right information so that someone comes in on it? One of the key ways I was once helpful was we started this series. It was called the Deep Dive series. And I had a technical product marketing manager. It was every Wednesday. And this is back when it was like Google Hangouts was a thing before Zoom of coming in and go. And we understood at that point in time that what our buyer was really interested in was reference architectures. That was really hard at that point in time to get reference architectures for cloud environments. So we would let anybody that would come in just listen to the tech talk. And this was particularly relevant to us because everybody was talking about cloud and we were selling like managed hosting, bare metal, VMware technologies, and everybody was talking AWS, et cetera. So we started this series to just talk about the stuff nobody else was talking about because they were, like the just regular Harper wasn't getting any love. So we just started this weekly one, ended up being incredibly successful. And the way we were useful is we would give us you could attend without an email. But if you wanted the reference architecture, which used to take us a lot of time that was being talked about on that Hangout, then you actually had to give us your email. And most often people did because they actually wanted that reference architecture. But what was really knowledgeable for us to learn, and we learned this from one of our solution consultants, they're like, yeah, people just really have a hard time coming up with these reference architectures. And that ends as being one of the really things that's difficult. It's very hard for people to find these online. And I've since seen people get smart about it. AWS now has a reference architecture library. And so this is one of those, but at that time, I think it was like circa 2016, 2015, something like that. It wasn't as highly available. And that's where we were being useful to that community and really just providing a regular content. Because it was every Wednesday was the deep dive, people found a lot of value within that. The last one on our list, Ali, was going in on building communities. This is a big one that in developer markets, usually like you're building a community. Again, we talked about making items a destination, make your customer destination. But we had in our pre-call to this, we had a lot of debate around community. Let's start with some of your thoughts around this one. You were very passionate about this topic.
Yeah, every company I have ever worked at wants to build a community. The investors want it because the investors know the benefits to your business. And so they want to see you have a community. So at some point, some board member is going to tell the CEO, you should start a community. And if that falls on your plate, the things I would caution against is you can't do this by yourself. No single person at any company has ever built a community and been successful. And a lot of people will like to point to the examples of some other company, you know, they started small and then that community grew to 100,000 users overnight. And there are so many factors that go into building a successful community. But I would say, like anything in business and in life, there's some luck to it, right? There's a lot of hard work, a lot of hours, a lot of contributions. And then some people get lucky. But if you do want to build a community, I would say, make sure that this is like a corporate mandate. It's coming down from the CEO. When you go ask somebody else for help, because you're going to need to bug sales engineers, marketers, you know, you need some budget to host it. There's going to be money, time, commitment, etc. Make sure that you have the backup of some executive that you can point to, so that will become a priority for other people. Otherwise, it's going to be you with some freemium community tool. You're going to build one forum post, you'll post one thing, and then nobody will come. And I've just seen that. I've failed at it a couple times. I've succeeded in helping a couple communities grow and do better, but starting from scratch is incredibly difficult. So don't underestimate the lift. And if it is on your plate, if you've been tasked with this, or if it's something you want to do, think bigger than you currently are in the terms of time, effort, budget, people that need to help. I don't think this is oh, sure, just get me a junior marketer to help me build this thing and we should be good. And a year from now, we'll have 10,000 happy users talking to each other.
Now, communities are really, really hard to build. You have to have the stamina. I have failed at a community before, had a nice software, had the rest of it, but our company, it just wasn't the motion that we were invested in. It wasn't just the way we operated. And so then it was always looking at not just the headcount that had to support that, who was in it, how many traffic. It was very optimized on numbers that you really have to build around it. So if there's other processes like your support networks, et cetera, that already build into that community, and you can find it where you're creating a flavor to it, that's a different one. But, you know, there's also some other elements of communities outside of just those elements where you're answering questions. It's really one, we think of like the FinOps Foundation in our space, where they've been able to just build something that's outside of a particular, almost like vendor neutral. And that is definitely a strategic type of priority, where you really have to sit there and have an executive where that's a passion of theirs. That can't be up to a developer marketing team to go out there and go do. But definitely it's something that if you have a skill set of understanding what those problems and in bringing people together, it's definitely something to go out there and look at. And if it's something that you've never done before or lack, it could be great to get a good mentor in this space. There are a couple of people, at least I know on LinkedIn, so I imagine there's more that are part of these that lead communities, and maybe it could be something that you add them or you follow them, whether it's on LinkedIn or Twitter, and then just learn and maybe just ask questions for something like that. Like, how did you get started? What are some lessons learned? So if it's not something you come with, it's definitely a skill set. And it's definitely something that more and more organizations are hiring people to just lead their communities. When I was leading a community, I had a senior manager of just community. That was his job. And part of what he regularly did was go out there and benchmark and try to meet other people within the community that built communities. And that's one of those ones that if you don't walk into a role with that skill set, just go out there and people are usually helpful. You know, just try to not to go to your direct competitors. So there's a little bit of conflict of interest, but you know, definitely if it's somebody who's just trying to help somebody coming up, you're probably going to get a lot of people that are out there wanting to support you.
Yeah. And this, I think, goes back to what we've been talking about, the persona and being useful. But I generally think when it comes to marketing content, you know, I assume that nobody wants to hear from Ali, right? I'm a vendor, I'm biased, I work for this company, and of course I'm going to promote and evangelize my own product. So I assume that everybody wants to hear from their peers, right? So if I'm selling to developers, developers don't want to hear from me, they want to hear from the chief architect at Google or some other company and somebody that they look up to and respect. And with Becky's mention of the FinOps Foundation, that was a vendor agnostic group, but the caliber of the members in that group was incredible. It was all blue chip companies, and it's VPs of finances at the largest companies in the world. And so that grew very, very quickly because everybody else coming along, of course, they want to hear what those people have to say. So I would say tactically, that's a great route to take if you can get, developer peers of high caliber that developers want to hear from. That's just a natural magnet of drawing people to that community. I would say a couple other tactical examples would be, you don't necessarily have to create the entire watering hole and community where everybody gathers, everybody talks to each other. What if you were to create a well of information of no one solving problem X, and you just gather all the best content around that? And that could be a YouTube series. And then the community is the people in the comments kind of talking back and forth of like, yeah, I tried that, but that failed, etc. I've seen some YouTube influencers in the developer and IT spaces that have gathered these really strong communities of hundreds of thousands of subscribers just by creating valuable, useful content on a regular basis. So you kind of have to ask yourself, are you trying to educate a community on an interesting topic, or are you trying to create a means of them to all gather and communicate? And you better ask yourself if they don't have other options other than you for that, because there are a lot of communities out there, a lot of failed communities, but a lot of good communities that people already go to. And do they really need to be part of a fifth or a sixth community? So find an underserved part of the market and be prepared to put in a lot of work to source good content, good people, and have a reason for them to be there and come back on a regular basis.
All right. Well, so for Marketing Summit, this is it from myself and Allie. We're going to wrap up giving you a view of what to learn. Number one in our list is know your persona, know your own limits. Are you technical? Are you not technical enough? And how do you want to approach it based on that? Big, which is number three, is be useful. Just, make that marketing that and that messaging that resonates. Know your buyer, use your research skills. This is key because that's the way you're useful if you know that. And then be, walk in with that community. It's the right one. Be a little skeptical, but again, go back to that number three, be useful, figure out what's the right space there. And Allie really nailed it, which is find the white space, an underserved community. If so, maybe just a YouTube series might be more than enough rather than investing in something larger than that. With that, ping us. Allie and I are both available on LinkedIn. We'd love to connect with you. Have a good rest of your day. Bye.
Good luck, everyone.